Chapter 1663. Song Qing-shu did not search around like a headless fly. Instead, he first went to the highest point of the town and looked down at the entire town. Finally, his gaze locked onto a carriage in the north of the city. With a flash, he chased after it. In the woods on the northern outskirts of the city, a luxurious carriage slowly traveled on the road. A few guards rode on horses and protected the carriage in the center. Every one of them had their temples bulging, and their eyes were sharp. From time to time, a glint flashed in their eyes. It was obvious that they were all hidden experts. Suddenly, the driver's eyes changed. He pulled the reins and shouted, "Stop!" Because the carriage suddenly stopped, Huazheng, who was gently wiping Guojing's face, stumbled and almost fell in the carriage. She was shocked and angry. "Mir, what the hell are you doing?" The person in the driver's seat was the Mir she mentioned. At this moment, his body was stiff, and he did not dare to move an inch. He did not know when it started, but there was another person beside him. Seeing that Mir did not answer, Huazheng opened the curtain angrily. Just as she was about to scold her subordinate, her acupoints were sealed in a flash. At this moment, the guards beside her finally reacted. They roared and pulled out their swords to help. However, the mysterious person raised his hand and sealed their acupoints without them knowing what happened. This mysterious person was, of course, Song Qing-shu. He had chased after her all the way here. Although Huazheng's guards were experts, she was just an idle princess. Her subordinates were not as powerful as Taoist Baisang, Xianming elders, or Cubalized Jinlun Fuwang and Jingang faction master. It was because he recognized Huazheng that Song Qing-shu only sealed their acupoints and did not kill them. When he was with Xiao Long Nu and Icy Snow in the inn, he happened to see Huazheng, who was by Zhao Min's side. Based on his relationship with Zhao Min, Huazheng should be his distant relative, so he did not want to offend her. At this moment, Huazheng and her companions were even more shocked than him. After all, they were carefully selected experts, but they were subdued in a single move. Although they had high expectations when they learned that he had rescued Guojing from thousands of enemies, they did not expect that they would not be high enough. Song Qing-shu naturally had no time to understand their shock. He hurriedly checked Guojing's pulse and was relieved to find that he was safe. Huazheng noticed his expression and said, "Don't worry, I won't hurt him." She recalled that the mysterious man saved Guojing from the Jin army and showed a concerned expression just now. He should be a friend and not an enemy. I know that other people in this world can harm him, but you won't. Song Qing-shu sighed and casually unsealed her acupuncture point. Huazheng looked confused. "Do you know me?" "Princess Huazheng of Mongolia." It's not hard to guess her identity. Song Qing-shu did not hesitate and directly revealed her identity. "Who the hell are you?" Huazheng looked shocked. She had been away from the center of power in Mongolia for years, so not many people could recognize her. "You don't need to know who I am. This time, I will spare your lives since you didn't hurt him." After saying that, she was about to take Guojing away. Although the mysterious man was unfathomable, seeing Guojing's pale face, Huazheng did not know where the courage came from. She hurriedly said, "Senior, let me take care of him." She saw that the man's kung fu was so high and she could not tell his age, so she subconsciously regarded him as a senior. "Senior?" Song Qing-shu touched the mask on his face. He knew that covering his face made her misunderstand, but he did not intend to explain. "You take care of him?" Huazheng hurriedly nodded. "Brother Guo is so seriously injured that he needs a brilliant doctor and many rare and precious herbs. He also needs someone to take care of him. I see that you are in a hurry, and I am afraid that it will not be convenient for you to take care of him. Can I take care of him?" This. Song Qing-shu suddenly hesitated. He subconsciously wanted to refuse, but he suddenly realized that there was no one more suitable than Huazheng. She had enough manpower, material resources, and financial resources to treat Guojing's injury. The key was her love for Guojing, and she would do her best to take care of him. She was completely different from those servants. Moreover, with her identity, she was able to escape from the search of the Jin kingdom. Seeing that he was silent, Huazheng thought that he would not agree. She hurriedly said, "Since you know who I am, you must also know about the past between me and Brother Guo." I will never hurt him. Song Qingshu nodded. I know you won't hurt him, but now Mongolia and the Song Kingdom are enemies. I am worried that you will let him lose his freedom after you save him. Hua Zheng smiled bitterly. I couldn't make him stay back then. Why would I force him to stay now? I can promise you that when Brother Guo recovers, I will not stop him from leaving or staying. Song Qingshu nodded. That's fine. If I find out that you've done anything to harm him in the future, you see my martial arts. Even if you hide in the palace, I'll still take your life. I dare not, Hua Zheng hurriedly said. Well, then take good care of him. With these words, Song Qingshu disappeared from the carriage. Before he left, he unsealed the acupoints of the others. As soon as the Mongolian masters were free, they hurriedly surrounded the carriage and asked nervously, Princess, are you all right? I'm fine. Let's keep going. Hua Zheng wiped the cold sweat off her face. Her face was pale because of fear and nervousness. Song Qingshu hid in the dark and only came down from a tree after the Mongols disappeared. He had no choice but to hand Guojing over to Hua Zheng. First, he was too busy to take care of Guojing, and he would not feel at ease if he sent his spies to look after him. Second, Guojing needed to recuperate for a long time, and he needed a lot of precious herbs. Although the Golden Snake Camp was not short of money, they did not have enough resources, and many things needed to be found at the last minute. Compared to the Mongols who plundered other countries, the treasury was rich. In addition, the Mongols had gathered famous doctors from the Central Plains, the Western regions, West Asia, and Eastern Europe, so they should be more confident in treating Guojing. Of course, he could not deny that he had his own selfish motives. He wanted Hua Zheng to bring Guojing back to Mo Bay. That way, they would be able to distance themselves from each other. If Hua Zheng took good care of Guojing during this period of time, it would be even better if something happened between them. It's a pity that Hua Zheng is too straightforward. If it was Zhao Min, she would have gotten Guojing's body and mind, even if she drugged him. Thinking of Zhao Min's beautiful smile, Song Qingshu could not help but show a gentle smile. Chapter 1664. Seeing Song Qingshu's return, Tashtish's eyes revealed a hint of surprise. After all, the difficulty of impersonating Tranquil had increased exponentially during this period of time. Living a life that was akin to walking on a tightrope every day had left her exhausted. Although she was unwilling to admit it, now that the other party had returned, she suddenly felt a sense of relief. Tashtish frowned and quickly dispelled the weakness in her heart. She said to Song Qingshu, You've returned just in time. I'm about to head to the marshal's tent for a meeting. You should come along. Song Qingshu nodded. He was indeed curious about the current situation. A few days ago, I heard that the Jin soldiers had discovered your whereabouts. I knew that you would return soon. On the way, Tashtish said in a low voice. Song Qingshu asked, How did Fu Sanzhongyi react? Tashtish smiled. Of course he flew into a rage. Guojing, whom he had painstakingly captured with great difficulty, was rescued by someone else. It was as if a cooked duck had flown away. He vigorously investigated and, as you expected, pinned the suspect on the Eastern heretic, Huang Yaoshi. Unfortunately, Huang Yaoshi's whereabouts are unknown. Where could he find him? Moreover, the war with the Southern Song dynasty has progressed to a new stage. The matter of Guojing's capture can only be left unsettled. Due to this, the soldiers have a lot of opinions about him, and many are grumbling in private. Just wait and see. When he returns to the capital, his political enemies will definitely use this as an excuse to attack him. When that time comes, we can push the boat with the current and plan our own men in the army. At present, Fu Sanzhongyi could barely be considered to be on Tang Quobian's side. However, he was old and virtuous. His prestige in the army was too high. Moreover, he was loyal to the Jin. If he were to find out that Tang Quobian was a fake, he would definitely be the first to jump out and punish him. Therefore, it was necessary to take precautions in advance. Song Qingshu nodded. Indeed, we must prepare for a rainy day. However, this man is loyal. We must not harm his life. It would be best to bestow him with a false reputation and remove him from a position of real power. Tish rolled her eyes at him. Having watched from the sidelines for so many years, I'm already familiar with this method. You don't need to teach me. Back then, she was the most beautiful Lady Peach Blossom in the capital city. She was surrounded by princes and princes, and the people she interacted with were all high-ranking officials. In addition, during this period of time, she pretended to be Tang Quobian. Her political skills might even be better than Song Qingshu's. Song Qingshu giggled and said, "Yes, yes, yes. It's my fault. I underestimated Madam." Tish spat and said, "Don't shout recklessly. It will be troublesome if someone hears you." Even though she was now in Tang Quobian's appearance, the flirtatious look in her eyes was still very charming. As the two chatted, they arrived at the commander's tent. The other generals were already waiting there. After greeting each other, they began to report the latest battle situation. Song Qingshu stood to one side and listened quietly. He learned that on the southern Song's side, Jiankong Commander-in-Chief Li Shuang suffered a crushing defeat outside the walls of Shouzhou, and Huang Fubin was defeated in Tangzhou. Jiangzhou Commander-in-Chief Wang Dajia failed to capture Kaizhou, coupled with the defeat in Sichuan and the crushing defeat of the main force in Suzhou. The Southern Song's northern expedition this time ended in complete failure. While the military meeting was going on, in the Jia's mansion of Lin, and Liao Yingzhong reported to Jia Sherdao that Guo Jing's entire army had been annihilated and that he himself had been captured. Later, he was rescued by a mysterious person. Although the Jin men deliberately concealed the news, they couldn't escape the investigation of the Isle of Heroes intelligence network. Liao Yingzhong said as he observed Jia Shirdao's expression. Rescued him in the midst of thousands of troops. Jia Shirdao couldn't help but exclaim. Liao Yingzhong hurriedly explained, it wasn't a direct rescue. At that time, there was an explosion in the military camp, and that person took advantage of the chaos to rescue Guojing. According to the news, it was Huang Yaoshi who rescued him. Huang Yaoshi? Jia Shirdao nodded and said, that is indeed possible. The Jin men are really useless. How could they let Guojing escape from death? Liao Yingzhong said with a smile, My lord, you worry too much. According to reliable sources, Guojing is already seriously injured, and he could be taken away by the King of Hell at any time. Moreover, the Jin men have been chasing after him for the past few days. Huang Yaoshi has been carrying Guojing on a bumpy journey, and I'm afraid he's already dead. Jia Shirdao snorted and said, Huang Yaoshi is very knowledgeable, and he's also good at the art of Qi Huang. I'm sure he can save Guojing. Liao Yingzhong shook his head and said, medicine can only cure illnesses, not lives. If Huang Yaoshi was really that good, he would have saved his wife back then. Seeing Jia Shidao's disapproving expression, Liao Yingzhong hurriedly added, if my lord is still worried, we can use a little trick to kill Guojing. Oh, Jia Shidao was finally interested. Liao Yingzhong covered his mouth with his fan and whispered, my lord, you can submit a memorial to the imperial court and ask them to commend Guojing for his loyalty. Tell them about how brave he was after he was captured and how he died as a martyr. Make sure everyone knows about it. Jia Shidao's expression changed, and a strange smile appeared on his face. You're imitating Li Ling. Liao Yingzhong smiled and said, also, Hong Qingqiu of the former Ming dynasty died because the imperial court thought he was unyielding. Later, when the news came that he surrendered to the alien tribe, everyone in the imperial court would feel angry that they were fooled. The more brave he was in the early stage, the more they would hate him afterward. When the time comes, we will secretly leak some information and let everyone think that Guojing survived because he surrendered to the Jin. In his rage, the emperor will definitely execute Guojing's entire family. At that time, even if Guojing is still alive, with his family killed, he will definitely choose to surrender to the Jin for revenge. At that time, his crime will be confirmed. Jia Shidao laughed and said, back in the days of the Three Kingdoms, Jiasu was known as the Poison Warrior. I think Yingzhong is no worse than Jiao Wenhe. Liao Yingzhong picked up his fan and bowed. My lord, you flatter me. Jia Shidao stood by the window and looked at the misty and hazy city of Lin, and he said meaningfully, this time, not only do we have to kill the traitor Gua, but we also have to kill the real master. Liao Yingzhong came to his side and asked tentatively, "My lord, are you talking about Han Zhou?" This time, the northern expedition led by Han Jiefu has failed, which is enough reason to cut off his wings in the court. Jia Sherdao had a ferocious smile on his face. And it seems that the Jin kingdom will probably take advantage of the victory to invade the south. That will be the death of Han Jiefu. In the camp of the Jin kingdom thousands of miles away, there was a heated debate about whether or not to invade the south. The experienced and prudent people wanted to take the opportunity to stop the war and extort money from the southern Song. But this time, the Song army was so weak that most of the generals of the Jin kingdom became more confident. They planned to conquer the great land of the south in one go. Therefore, the voice of the pro-Jin side had the absolute upper hand. Even though Song Qingshu was now the most powerful man in the Jin kingdom, he couldn't go against the majority. The only thing he could do was stop them from invading the south. He didn't want the people to suffer from a war, nor did he want the Jin kingdom and the Song kingdom to have a decisive battle here, which would give the Mongols an advantage for no reason. He was from a later generation, so he knew how powerful the Mongols were at this time. When they finished their business in the western region and returned to the Central Plains, it would be the beginning of the suffering for the countries in the Central Plains. Over the past few days, I've been sending red envelopes on the official account, and I've really experienced the speed of the readers who have been single for 30 years. It's really fast, but fortunately, there's a big sponsor like the Union Pay. Those who haven't received red envelopes can go to the monk's official account and ask for money from the Union Pay. Chapter 1665. But now the Jin leaders were in high spirits, so Song Qingshu had to wait until the Jin suffered a setback and then proposed peace talks. He believed in the strength of the Southern Song dynasty. The Southern Song dynasty was not good at attacking, but it was good at defending. It took the Mongols decades to conquer the Southern Song dynasty. It was impossible for the Jin to destroy the Southern Song dynasty. Of course, he could enforce military discipline on the way to the south and forbid looting of women and children. But he also objected to it. After all, the Jin soldiers fought for the spoils of war. If it was forbidden, it would hurt morale and cause dissatisfaction among the soldiers. Song Qingshu explained that the purpose of attacking the Southern Song dynasty was to destroy the country. If they killed and looted along the way, it would arouse the hatred of the people in the south, which would be a problem for the southern expedition. As for the morale, the Southern Song dynasty had a large treasury, which was enough to reward the soldiers. In addition, the imperial court would open the treasury to reward the soldiers. Hearing this, the servant felt that he was being too soft-hearted, but he didn't say anything. After all, he was not only the most powerful man in the military, but also the most powerful man in the government. Since he had spoken, the imperial court would reward him. In the next few days, news came from the south. Han Xingzhou dismissed Su Sherdan and Deng Yulong because of the failure of the army. He appointed Qiu Pai as the governor of the two Huai provinces and Yi Shizhi as the governor of Jiankong Prefecture and the governor of the Yangtze River. After Qiu Pai was appointed, he gave up Sizhou and retreated to Shui, saying that he could save the troops in Huaidong. The Song army retreated, and the Jin army advanced in 9 directions. The situation changed from a northern expedition of the Song army to the southern expedition of the Jin army. Tashkis sneered when she heard this news. Han Xingzhou is crazy. Qiu Pai was the one who strongly opposed his northern expedition. Now he's been replaced. Isn't he destroying his own reputation? Because her husband, Han Qinya, died indirectly because of Han Xingzhou's northern expedition, she didn't like him. Song Qingshu explained. Do you think Han Xingzhou wants to replace him? Someone must be responsible for the failure of the northern expedition. How could Jia Sherdao and Shimi Yuan let go of such a good opportunity? Han Xingzhou could only sacrifice the rook to save the king. He used Su Sherdan and Deng Yulong as scapegoats. Of course, he wanted to replace his trusted subordinates. But what about the others? The appointment of Qiu Ming and the others is most likely the result of the Lin and court's game. Tajtish frowned and said, Chun Shaoqing, who abandoned Guijing's troops and deserted in the face of battle. only received a superficial demotion. Wang Zidong, who gave the order, received nothing at all. Qian, you must have been blind to have worked for such an imperial court. Song Qingshu smiled bitterly. Although Chan Shaoqing has been demoted, he has completed the task assigned to him by his superiors. It won't be long before he rises up the ranks like a rocket. Wang Zidong is the clan leader of the Lin Chuan Wang family. Now that someone is in charge of this matter, why would they investigate him? This is politics. Tajkis snorted. I can't be bothered with the internal strife of the Southern Song's officialdom. I'm only concerned about how to clean up the mess. Were they just going to let the Jin and Song kingdoms continue fighting like this? You should know that I'm still waiting to deal with Mongolia. I don't want to waste the Jin kingdom's strength in the south. She had been Tang Qubian for a long time and had a lot of intelligence. Naturally, she knew that the Southern Song dynasty was still powerful. How could the Jin kingdom take it all at once? If the war really broke out, it would take at least 10 years. This was the last thing she wanted to see. Don't worry. It won't be long before there's an opportunity to stop the war and negotiate. Looking at the mountains and rivers in the south, Song Qingshu's eyes were deep and profound. Wan Yinggang led his army and captured Guanghua, Zhaoyang, and Jiangling. Then he broke through Xinyang, Xiangyang, and Suizhou. Finally, he besieged Dahan. Fu Sanfan led his army to cross the Huai River. The Song army was defeated and the Jin army surrounded Hezhou. Ashur and Lai Ziren captured Chuzhou and Jinzhou. Huaishi County was occupied by the Jin army. However, the Southern Song dynasty finally reacted and began to gather troops from all over the country. The Jin army's offensive was finally stopped, and the two sides began to fight at dawn. Song Qingshu sighed for a long time when he heard that Xiangyang had been conquered. When Guojing was guarding this place, the Mongolians had failed to conquer it for a long time. Now it had fallen. On the one hand, the Song army was defeated, and on the other hand, the soldiers and civilians of Xiangyang had probably lost their morale when they heard about Guojing's death. As for the news of Guojing's death, Song Qingshu knew what was going on. He was afraid that someone in the Southern Song dynasty didn't want him to come back alive. Han Xingzhou couldn't even protect himself now, so it was obviously impossible. So it was most likely Jia Sherdao and Shermi Yuan. Shouldn't Guojing be on Jia Sherdau's side? Song Qingshu couldn't figure it out. However, he was more concerned about how sad Huang Rong would be when she heard the news. It was a pity that he couldn't explain it to her. I can only hope that Peach Blossom Island is isolated from the world, and Huang Yaosher won't tell his daughter about it. Song Qingshu could only think that way. In the past few days, the Southern Song dynasty was also in turmoil. Han Xingzhou took the opportunity to impeach Jia Sherdau's officials and put his own people back in power. He tried to send people to negotiate. Soon, Qiuming was dismissed, and Zhang Yan was appointed to supervise the Jianghuai army. Han Xingzhou donated 200,000 yuan of his own money to subsidize the army. He also sent Fang Xinru to Kaifeng to negotiate with the Jin. Song Qingshu couldn't help but sigh with relief when he heard the news. This was the opportunity he had been waiting for. After all, the Jin kingdom was the victor of the war. It was impossible for the Southern Song dynasty to propose peace. If the Southern Song dynasty proposed peace, it would mean that they would be taken advantage of. As long as the Southern Song dynasty was ruthless enough, they would most likely be satisfied. Given the Southern Song dynasty's character, it was exactly what they wanted to buy peace with money. They lacked everything but money. In fact, the generals in the army had been discussing this topic for a long time. Although they had been unstoppable for a while, they were now in a predicament of being alone. The recent attacks had been thwarted, and the increasing number of soldiers of the Southern Song dynasty had calmed down the generals who had been blinded by victory. Song Qingshu hinted from time to time, and they realized that they had already gotten enough spoils of war. Why should they continue to fight at the risk of death? Therefore, the peace talks became a matter of course. What was left was how to get the most benefits. One day, while Song Qingshu was chatting with Tajkis in the tent, a soldier suddenly came to report that a fairy-like girl outside the camp wanted to see him. A fairy-like girl? Hearing the soldier's description, Song Qing-shu was confused for a moment. Who would want to see him at this time? The key was that he was Tang Kuo-bien, and the girl had asked to see Tang Kuo-bien. Is it one of Tang Kuo-bien's former girlfriends? Song Qing-shu shook his head to dispel the idea. If that was the case, Tang Kuo-bien's luck with women was too exaggerated. Chapter 1666. Is that so? Tadish, who was eavesdropping by the side, immediately became interested. Let's go out and welcome her. Song Qing-shu's face darkened as he thought. Why are you getting involved? He hastily said, my current status is different. If we go out to welcome her, it's better if we secretly invite her in. Yes. As the bodyguard left, he was still thinking to himself, with such a charming appearance, it's no wonder the marshal would favor her. It's a pity that my parents didn't give me a good appearance. Otherwise, I would be able to look for the marshal. The image of Tang Kuo-bien's bearded face surfaced in his mind, and he couldn't help but shudder. This taste is too heavy. It's best not to think about it in that direction. Hastily recalling Tadish's appearance, the bodyguard finally felt a little better. However, when he realized that the other party was also a handsome bodyguard, he felt even more disgusted. TSK, is this a show of jealousy? Tadish was currently disguised as a man and presented herself as Tang Kuo-bien's bodyguard. This person could only be considered a peripheral bodyguard and not one of the core bodyguards trained by Tadish in the past. Thus, there was a slight misunderstanding. What jealousy? A gentle voice sounded. The bodyguard raised his head and saw a lady like a white jade immortal, bright and beautiful beyond compare. Unknowingly, he had already arrived at the camp's entrance. No, nothing. The marshal has invited the lady in. The bodyguard felt his heart racing when she glanced at him. His words became flustered and his face faintly paled, adding a touch of pitifulness to it. Along the way, he didn't dare to speak to her and could only silently lead the way. After she entered the marshal's tent, the bodyguard stared blankly at her disappearing figure. After a long while, he shook his head. A fairy-like lady like her was destined to have no interaction with a small fry like him. He could only look up to her like a speck of dust and shouldn't think too much about it. Very quickly, he composed himself and returned to his sentry post. While Song Qing-shu and Taj-tish were guessing the identity of the young lady mentioned by the personal guard, the tent flap was suddenly pulled open. A sweet and graceful figure walked in. As soon as she entered, the entire commander's tent seemed to brighten up. When Song Qing-shu saw her appearance, he couldn't help but be pleasantly surprised. Ying, why are you here? As he spoke, he went over to hug her. If this person wasn't Ren Ying, who he hadn't seen for a long time, who else could it be? Unexpectedly, when she saw him open his arms to hug her, Ren Ying subconsciously took a few steps back and said with some caution, "Ooh, you are Qing-shu?" Although she knew that Song Qing-shu had pretended to be Tang Kuo-bien, she had never seen it with her own eyes. Yes, Song Qing-shu deliberately used his original voice. Who else could it be if not me? Ren Ying's face softened, but she still didn't let him hug her. Ew, I always feel weird when you look like this. Then I'll take off my mask and hug you. As he spoke, Song Qing-shu attempted to remove his mask. Ever since Ren Ying exhausted her lifespan by executing the art of blood ignition, he had always felt a sense of tenderness towards her. He didn't wish for her to suffer even the slightest grievance. Cough, cough. At this moment, Tadish couldn't bear to watch any longer and reminded him. We are still in the barracks, and a general could enter at any time. What if you remove your mask and expose yourself? Song Qing-shu momentarily hesitated. He knew that Tadish's words made sense. At this moment, Ren Ying also spoke up. Qing-shu, don't lose the bigger picture because of small gain. There's no need to be so anxious. She was different from others, possessing a graceful temperament. Her current weak voice made it even more difficult for one to refuse. All right then, we'll slowly chat at night. Song Qing-shu nodded his head. Suddenly, he noticed Ren Ying's pale cheeks blushing. Tadish also revealed a smile that wasn't a smile. After a moment of shock, Song Qing-shu couldn't help but laugh bitterly. His original intention was to say that there wouldn't be any official worries at night, and it would be more private and safe. However, from their expressions, it was clear that they had misunderstood. Ren Ying had always been at Sundara. Even if she was willing, she couldn't bring herself to admit it. Moreover, there was currently an outsider in the tent. This young lady is... She had long noticed Tadish. Unlike the soldier from before, her vast experience allowed her to easily deduce that Tadish was a woman dressed as a man. Even though Tadish was currently dressed as a man, Ren Ying was still stunned by her beauty. Even though she was already mentally prepared, personally witnessing such a beauty by Song Qingshu's side still made her feel a little sour. He's good in other aspects, just that he's a little too fickle. Young lady? Hearing how Ren Ying addressed her, Tadish's frosty face couldn't help but reveal a trace of a smile. After all, there wasn't a woman who didn't wish to remain young forever. Even though she was still a beauty, capable of causing the downfall of cities and states, she gradually felt the mercilessness of time. Now that she was recognized as a young lady by a beauty of the same level, she naturally beamed with joy. Tajkis is my partner in the Jin Kingdom. When I was not around, she disguised herself as Tang Quobian and oversaw the Jin Kingdom. Song Qingshu gave a brief introduction. By the way, you should have heard of her other identity. She is the former leader of the Ming cult's 4 great guardian kings, Zishan Dragon Queen, the #1 beauty of the pugilistic world, Purple Dragon Queen. Although Purple Dragon Queen's appearance was stunning, she soon vanished from the pugilistic world due to Han Qinya's betrayal of the Ming dynasty. The title of the #1 beauty of the pugilistic world soon fell onto Huang Rong. Compared to her, Huang Rong's exposure in the pugilistic world was sufficiently long that most of the pugilistic world's people had forgotten about her beauty. However, Ren Ying, as the saintess of the Sun Moon God sect, was constantly paying attention to the movements of the upper echelons of the Ming dynasty, which was on par with the Sun Moon God sect. Naturally, she knew about this past. According to the rumors in the pugilistic world, isn't she already married? Even though she had some doubts in her heart, Ren Ying was a rather wise and mature person. She wouldn't rashly say it before she was clear of the situation and embarrass everyone. It's all in the past. How could she be as beautiful as you, little sister? If the other party had directly praised her beauty, Tadish wouldn't have any reaction at all. On the contrary, this kind of unintentional praise was extremely pleasing to her. She couldn't help but have a much better impression of the other party. Her tone was also no longer as cold and distant as it usually was. The two of you should stop flattering each other. Song Qingshu felt a headache coming on. Ying, did something happen for you to suddenly come here to look for me? Upon hearing his question, Ren Ying's eyes that were originally filled with joy upon seeing him immediately dimmed. Qingshu, you should have heard about the unforeseen event in Sichuan, right? Song Qingshu immediately reacted. You're worried about Linghu Chong? Ren Ying nodded slightly. She didn't try to conceal it as she said in a clear and bright manner. I know Linghu Chong's character. He would never commit such a despicable act of betraying his country for glory. Song Qingshu sighed. Have you ever thought that he might have accidentally fallen into a demonic barrier because he lost you? Has he begun to pursue power and strength by hook or by crook in order to snatch you back? Chapter 1667. Go to Sichuan. Song Qingshu was startled. Recently, he had received various intelligence reports that Wu Shi was about to publicly proclaim himself king in Sichuan and rebel against the Southern Song dynasty was a foregone conclusion. He was also thinking of going there to see if he could fish in troubled waters. However, due to the recent war between the Jin dynasty and the Song dynasty, he had yet to make a move. Of course, he was clear-headed enough to know that Sichuan was too far away from the Golden Snake Battalion's territory. Even if he spent a great deal of effort to obtain Sichuan, he would not be able to defend it. Seeing him pondering, Ren Ying thought that he was in a difficult position. She hastily said, Qingshu, I am already your wife. At this point, a trace of shyness flashed across her face. Of course I have to ask for your opinion on this matter. If you are unwilling, I won't go. Watching her bashful and perturbed demeanor, Tadish couldn't help but feel a little weird. She was Song Qingshu's official wife. yet she couldn't see the light of day for the rest of her life. Thinking of this, her heart skipped a beat. Why would I have such thoughts? Could it be that I have fallen in love with him? How could it be? I'm only mutually beneficial with him, borrowing his strength to deal with the Mongols. My daughter is already in her teens. How could she fall in love with such a young man? But then again, he is really not young. Not knowing what scene she was imagining, Toshkis's heart swayed. The flirtatious expression on her face was enough to put the moon and flowers to shame. Song Qingshu was keenly aware of Ren Yingying's nervousness, so he smiled and said, "You're overthinking it, Yingying. I already have plans to go to Sichuan, but I just haven't decided when to leave yet." Seeing her lover so open-minded, Ren Yingying felt as if her heart was smeared with a layer of honey. However, she quickly felt guilty. "Qingshu, I know it is not right of me to act like this. But after all, Ling Huchong and I are friends. I don't want to see him in trouble without doing anything." Song Qingshu walked over and pulled her hand. He smiled and comforted her. "Yingying, you don't need to be so nervous. I am different from other men in this world. How could I be unhappy over such a small matter? In my opinion, if you remain indifferent to Ling Huchong's misfortune, I will treat you coldly." Coming from the modern world, he was indeed far more open-minded than the men of this world in this regard. Moreover, he knew that Ren Yingying was kind-hearted and couldn't completely ignore Ling Huchong's suffering. Ren Yingying was very touched by his words. Song Qingshu, even though she was the holy nun of the Sun-Moon sect, she was still a woman. She would still be burdened by the ethics of this world. How could she not be moved when she met an open-minded lover like Song Qingshu? When Tashtish heard her calling him Song Lang, her teeth nearly fell off. She couldn't help but ask, "If you go to Sichuan now, what about here?" Song Qingshu replied, "Now that the Jin Kingdom's attack has come to a standstill, the Southern Song Dynasty has started the process of peace talks, and the Jin soldiers are also thinking of going home. What's left is the peace talks, which you are good at. Next, you'll be here as Tang Quobian to handle the peace talks." Even though she was already aware of this, for some unknown reason, Tadish still felt a surge of irritation in her heart. "Do as you wish, but don't forget what you promised me." Having said that, she walked out with a frosty countenance. Looking at Tashtish's back as she left, Ren Yingying looked embarrassed. She moved closer to Song Qingshu and whispered, "Did I say something wrong?" Song Qingshu comforted her. "Women are bound to be in a bad mood for a few days. Let's be alone together." With that said, he pulled her into his arms and sat on a chair. Ren Yingying blushed and hurriedly said, "Don't. I feel weird seeing you like this." Song Qingshu laughed and tore off the mask on his face, revealing his original appearance. He said to the guards outside, "Pass down my order. From now on, I won't be seeing any guests. Even if it's an extremely important matter, let them wait." Hearing his words, Ren Yingying's face became even more tender and beautiful. This is not good. What if you delay an urgent military matter?" Song Qingshu's fingers slid across her delicate face, revealing a trace of an inexplicable smile. "Right now, you're the most urgent military matter." Feeling the man's aggressive aura, Ren Yingying was startled. You want to do it here?" Although she came from the devil cult, to a certain extent, she was more of a lady from a noble family than most of the ladies from noble families. However, it was this shyness that made Song Qingshu even more interested. "Why not?" Song Qingshu laughed heartily and lowered his head to kiss her tender red lips. Ren Yingying originally had a bellyful of objections, but how could she resist his experienced methods? Very quickly, her whole body turned limp, and in a daze, he took advantage of her body. After a long time, Song Qingshu withdrew from her body with satisfaction. Looking at her sweaty face, he suddenly had an idea. "Your skin is rosy now, completely different from your usual pale face. Could it be that my blissful Diana has a nourishing effect on you? It seems that we have to be more intimate in the future." Tears flowed in Ren Yingying's eyes. At this time, she had no strength at all. She could only charmingly and weakly roll her eyes at him. If this kind of thing can make up for lifespan, then the burning blood technique will not become a taboo method of the divine cult. Song Qing-shu gently tidied up her messy clothes and said complacently, "How can ordinary men compare to the essence of a great master like me? Of course, it's useless." Hearing that his words were getting more and more out of hand, Ren Yingying shyly spat and hurriedly pressed his lips. "Stop talking." Song Qing-shu knew her character. On one hand, she was graceful and magnanimous, but on the other hand, she was incomparably shy. Therefore, he did not continue to provoke her. But in his heart, he secretly thought those words just now weren't just empty words. It seems to have some effect. In the future, I should nourish her more. Now that my cultivation base is close to the legendary Earth immortal realm, the essence of my spirit, chi, and spirit might really be able to make up for her lost lifespan. The duo spent the entire afternoon in the commander's tent as if they were glued to each other. However, an awkward situation occurred during the night. Due to Song Qing-shu's and Tadish's identities, they couldn't be seen in public. Therefore, they couldn't sleep together with others. However, there wasn't any reason for a personal guard to have a separate tent in this military camp. Therefore, the duo usually slept in the same tent. But with Ren Yingying's arrival, Tajkis immediately fell into a predicament. Earlier, out of sight, out of mind, she went out for a stroll. But as the sky gradually turned dark, she had no choice but to return. Due to her special identity, the guards outside the door did not stop her. When she entered, although she saw the two dressed neatly and chatting, she smelled the ambiguous atmosphere in the air and noticed Ren Yingying's flushed skin. As someone who had been through it, how could she not know what was going on? "I don't have anywhere to go," Tajkis said awkwardly. "You two can continue, just pretend that I don't exist." Ren Yingying felt even more awkward, because no matter how she looked at it, this was obviously Tajkis's territory. She could not help but suspect that she was occupying the magpie's nest. I'll go out." Song Qing-shu pulled her back and laughed. "How can I let these two beauties suffer? You two can sleep on the bed. I'll sleep on the floor." Chapter 1668. Ren Yingying had always held a noble status and wasn't used to sleeping with others. However, upon seeing Tajtish's beauty, she couldn't treat her as a commoner. Moreover, she didn't wish to put her lover in a difficult position. Thus, she tacitly agreed. Seeing that even his righteous wife didn't say anything, Tadish felt a bellyful of gloominess but couldn't say anything. She and Song Qing-shu were more like master and servant than partners. Recalling that she was under his control, she opened her mouth but ultimately didn't say anything. Instead, she tacitly agreed to it. Due to the after effects of using the art of blood ignition, Ren Yingying's body was much weaker than before. She was already exhausted from the long journey to find her lover. Moreover, after being tormented by him for an entire afternoon, she quickly felt drowsy and unknowingly fell asleep. Tajtish was at a loss as to what to do and was startled to see Ren Yingying falling asleep so quickly. After quietly observing for a moment, she knew that Ren Yingying wasn't faking it. She couldn't help but whisper to Song Qing-shu, who was sleeping on the floor nearby, "Your lovely wife's body seems to be a little weak." Song Qing-shu cast a pitying glance at Ren Yingying and sighed sorrowfully. This is the after effect of using the art of blood ignition. Art of blood ignition? Tajtish was startled. Just like how Ren Yingying knew about the Ming dynasty, as a high-ranking member of the Ming dynasty, she was naturally privy to certain secrets of the Sun Moon sect. The art of blood ignition was like a thunderclap reverberating in her ears. She was well aware of its might and was even more aware of its grave consequences. Song Qing-shu let out a bitter laugh and roughly explained Ren Yingying's situation. Tajtish was both shocked and in awe. As a fellow woman, she couldn't help but feel a sense of pity for Ren Yingying. "Originally, I was rather dissatisfied with your behavior of forgetting friends for love. However, in consideration of young Miss Run, I won't bicker with you." Tajtish lightly snorted in order to conceal the sadness of their impending separation. Forgetting friends for love? Song Qing-shu had an odd expression on his face. Who's a pervert and who's a friend? Big Miss Ren is young and beautiful. Of course she is a pervert, Tajtish snapped. Don't tell me you don't consider me as a friend? Song Qing-shu shook her head. Seeing that the other party was frowning, she continued. The Dragon King was recognized as the most beautiful woman in the martial arts world back then. Even after so many years, your looks are still on par with Ying-Ying's. In terms of beauty, Ying-Ying is inferior to you. Not to mention Ren Ying-Ying. Even if he counted all the other women he knew, there were probably no more than 3 who could compete with Purple Shan Dragon King at her peak in terms of appearance. Even so, it did not affect Ren Ying-Ying's position in his heart in the slightest. It should be known that a woman's charm did not only consist of her beauty, but also her feelings. Although Zishan Dragon Queen had reached the pinnacle of beauty, she was still slightly weaker in other aspects. Hearing him personally say that Ren Ying-Ying's appearance was inferior to hers, Tashtish's heart could not help but jump with joy. Although she was tired of hearing flattering words praising her beauty when she was young, she still had to see who was praising her. Putting on so many high hats for me. Isn't it because you want me to diligently work for you? Tashtish deliberately put on a straight face, but she could not help but reveal a smile on her face. Song Qingshu's expression suddenly changed, revealing an indescribable expression. We're about to separate, and I don't know when we'll meet again. Should we get intimate? A blush spread from her snow-white face to her neck. Tashtish spat. You're indeed a pervert. You just fooled around with Big Miss Ren for so long, yet you still have such thoughts. Sensing that her tone was somewhat uncertain, Song Qingshu quickly got up from the mattress and winked at her. It's not like you don't know about my body. Ying-Ying's body is weak now. How can I bear to keep tormenting her? You can't bear to torment your own wife, but when it comes to someone else's wife, you don't feel the heartache? For some unknown reason, Tashtish felt a wave of irritation in her heart. Her originally slightly amorous expression instantly turned frosty. Don't bother me, or I'll wake up Big Miss Ren. Song Qingshu was startled. He did not expect her to change her attitude so abruptly. However, having known her for so long, it was easy for him to deduce from her expression that there was no chance tonight. He could only return to his bed gloomily, thinking that women were truly the most fickle creatures in the world. Just like that, an awkward night passed. At dawn the next day, Song Qingshu brought Ren Ying-Ying and quietly left the military camp. Firstly, she was worried about Ling Hu Chang's safety. Secondly, Ren Ying-Ying was a famous character in the pugilistic world. If she were to stay in the military camp for too long and her identity was recognized, who knew if someone would link it to her? Tashtish watched as their silhouettes gradually disappeared into the distance. Suddenly, she felt a sense of disappointment and frustration. Did I go too far last night? However, she suddenly came to her senses and couldn't help but spit out. That scoundrel was obviously the one who went too far. He had just finished making out with another woman, and his entire body was reeking of another woman's fragrance. He didn't even wash up and wanted to touch me. I, Zishan Dragon Queen, am not his plaything. In truth, Tashtish didn't realize that the previously cold and frosty woman who instilled fear in the pugilistic world would one day become as conflicted as a little girl. Meanwhile, after Song Qingshu and Ren Ying-Ying left the military camp, Ren Ying-Ying said apologetically, "It's all my fault for delaying your business." Song Qingshu smiled as he held her soft hand. "Ying-Ying, how many times have I explained to you? Even though Sichuan is currently in turmoil, it represents a huge opportunity. I've already planned to make a trip there. Song Qingshu, I know how good you are to me." Having her hand held by him, Ren Ying-Ying's face blushed slightly. Her reserved nature made her want to retract her hand subconsciously. However, thinking that there were no outsiders here, she lowered her head and allowed him to do as he pleased. Looking at her cute and helpless appearance, Song Qingshu couldn't help but recall the scene of her shouting and wanting to kill him back then. He couldn't help but reveal a knowing smile. "What are you smiling at?" Noticing the mischievous smile on his lips, Ren Ying-Ying asked doubtfully. Song Qingshu couldn't help but tell her what was on his mind, provoking a punch from Ren Ying-Ying. "You still have the nerve to say that? The moment we met, you crawled into my bathtub. You don't know how many times I secretly cried at night because of this matter. I was too abrupt back then. Song Qingshu dodged as he begged for mercy. However, in his heart, he secretly thought that if he had such a chance again, he would most likely make the same choice. After all, at that time, her relationship with Ling Huchong had already reached a certain level. If he didn't find another way, he would probably never be able to cause a ripple in her heart for the rest of her life. Ren Yingying thought of all the past events and sighed endlessly. Every time they met, she was bullied to death by him. At that time, she hated him very, very much, but things were unpredictable. She didn't expect that she would actually become his wife. Now that she looked back at the past, she felt a different kind of sweetness. Like this, the two of them reminisced about the process of how they got to know each other through fighting as they rushed south. Originally, Ren Yingying had planned to ride a horse, but Song Qingshu was worried that her body was weak and couldn't withstand the jolting of a horse. Thus, he decided to take a boat upstream from the Three Gorges and White Emperor City to Sichuan. Ren Yingying couldn't dissuade him, so she could only let him be. However, when the two of them arrived at the shore of the Yangtze River, they suddenly discovered a big problem. An announcement at the dock informed them that with the two countries at war, the Yangtze River had entered the highest state of alert. Ordinary passenger and merchant ships were not allowed to pass through. Merchant ships are not allowed to pass. What's up with that boat? Ren Yingying asked, pointing at a huge merchant ship that was slowly approaching from the distance. Chapter 1669. Song Qingshu couldn't help but blame himself when he heard the boatman say that ordinary passenger ships and merchant ships were not allowed to travel together. He was mainly focused on persuading Ren Yingying to change from land to water. The main reason was that he was worried that she would be too weak to withstand the journey. At the same time, he had another selfish reason. He didn't want her white and tender legs to be worn out by horses, so he neglected the factor of war, thinking that he not only didn't save time, but also took her on a long detour. He couldn't help but blame himself. Until he heard Ren Yingying's question, he subconsciously looked in the direction of her finger and saw a huge ship coming from afar. The surrounding ships were like small sampans compared to it. More importantly, the South Song Navy didn't stop such an obvious target. Instead, they let it go. Song Qingshu's eyesight was so good that he could even see a South Song Navy general at the bow of the ship smiling obsequiously to a man who looked like a steward, but the steward just responded indifferently with a very cold attitude. I wonder which noble's merchant ship belongs to. Song Qingshu was a little confused, but it wasn't strange. After all, which of the ancient officials wasn't a big landlord? They all talked about etiquette and morality like saints and gentlemen, but they didn't allow the imperial court to do business on the sea. They said that they were fighting for the interests of the people. In the end, what interests did the people have? Wasn't it just the interests of their families? They were afraid that the imperial court would come forward and take away their business. The boatman saw Ren Yingying leaning in the arms of the man next to her, looking delicate and timid. Her delicate eyebrows were slightly knitted, as if she was deeply worried, but it still didn't damage her beautiful face. There was also a faint noble and inviolable temperament. He couldn't help but envy and jealousy, and deliberately showed off. Everyone who lives on the water knows them. Seeing his expression, how could Song Qingshu not know what he was thinking? He couldn't help but laugh and said indifferently, "Please enlighten me." The boatman secretly glanced at Ren Yingying. Seeing that she was also attracted, he couldn't help but feel more proud. "Since you were so sincere, I will also give you some advice. This ship is the mirror lake of the Ruan family. The Ruan family is the first royal merchant in the world. Isn't the number one royal merchant in the world the Shui family? How did it become the Ruan family?" Song Qingshu looked at the ship carefully and saw a big word embroidered on the flag, but he was still confused. The reason why the Shui family, one of the four big families in the Southern Song dynasty, was known as pearls are like soil and gold is like iron, was that they not only had a family master who was involved in political affairs, but also had the identity of imperial merchants. They could be said to be very rich. He had heard more than one person call the Shui family the first imperial merchant in the world after staying in Lin for so long. You don't understand, the eunuch explained. The Shui family mainly deals with overseas businesses, and they claim to be the best there. The Ruan family deals with inland businesses, and they are the best there. For those of us who were born by the river, many of us rely on the Ruan family to make a living. Naturally, we think that the Ruan family is the best royal merchant in the world. I see. Song Qingshu nodded slightly. He seemed to have heard of the name of the Ruan family before, but now he was in a high position. Even the Shui family, who had a chancellor, was not qualified to be on equal footing with him, not to mention the Ruan family, whose official background was not so prominent. Noticing the disapproval in his tone, the eunuch suddenly became anxious. Being able to become an imperial merchant, his background in Lin, and must be unfathomable. Everyone has various guesses, but no one can be sure. The only sure thing is that the husband of the Ruan family's master is a member of the Yang family, a wealthy family in Sichuan province. The master of the Ruan family is a woman? Ren Yingying, who had been calm on the side, asked in surprise. Don't you know? The eunuch seemed to be talking about something that everyone knew. Madame Ruan, as a woman, had made the family business bigger and bigger these years. These years, the Ruan family has a tendency to surpass the Shui family, and most of it is her credit. Then she's really amazing. Song Qingshu secretly clicked his tongue. If there was a woman in the future who made such a big family business, he would not be surprised at all. But now, in the Southern Song dynasty, where Neo-Confucianism was prevalent, there was actually such an achievement. It was really amazing. Madame Ruan is not only good at business, but she's also a great beauty. I was lucky enough to see her from distance. Not only is she unparalleled, but she is also very kind. She is just like a fairy descending to the world, the eunuch said with an intoxicated look on his face, as if he was recalling the scene in the past. But it is a little strange that every person who saw her described her appearance differently. Some said she was a dignified and quiet young woman. Some said she was a coquettish and beautiful fox spirit, and some said she was a girl with a sweet voice. Song Qingshu smiled slightly and did not care much. For a lowly eunuch like him, how many beauties had he seen in his life? Perhaps with a little beauty and a high status, he would treat her as a fairy. Naturally, there would be some falsehoods, but the other person's next words made his thoughts slightly waver. The eunuch obviously noticed the disbelief in his eyes and suddenly became anxious. Madame Ruan and the second daughter of the Shui family are called the two beauties of the imperial business by people in our business. They are different from the ordinary women who do not go out. They run their business and often show their faces in public. Many people in our business have seen them. Who doesn't praise their appearance? Although your wife is beautiful, she may not necessarily be comparable to them. Reniying smiled slightly. She had always been graceful and magnanimous. How could she take this person's words to heart? On the contrary, Song Qingshu's heart moved. He did not believe that this Madame Ruan was so beautiful, but he had seen the young daughter of the Shui family. Shui Baochai's appearance was beautiful, and her skin was as white as snow. In particular, her well-educated and dignified temperament made her look like a one-in-a-million great beauty. Of course, later on, when he inadvertently learned of her identity as a secret agent of the Imperial City Division, the cold and completely opposite side of her was a story for another time. At that time, in the banquet of the princes and nobles in Lin, he accidentally heard them talking about the Shui family. They said that eunuch Shui was really lucky to have two beautiful daughters. The eldest daughter, Shui Baochai, was already stunning enough, but the second daughter, Shui Baoqin, was even better. However, the second daughter mainly took care of the imperial business for the family. Every day, she followed the fleet to travel all over the country. In the city of Lin, and there were fewer opportunities to see her than the people at the bottom. Shui Baoqin. Song Qingshu could not help but think of the perfect woman who suddenly appeared in the middle and late stage of the original novel of the Dream of Red Chamber. Her appearance and talent faintly overshadowed the two heroines, Lin Daiyu and Shui Baochai. Even Shui Baochai, who had always been dignified and self-restrained, could not help but say a few words of jealousy. Moreover, she did not enter the official list of the 12 beauties of Jinling, which proved that she was very happy in this life, so she did not have to enter the unlucky life department. This woman was so perfect that it made people jealous. Although Song Qingshu had never seen her in this world, with Shweb Baochai in front of him, he believed that her appearance was roughly at the standard. Now he heard that this Madame Ruan could actually be called the two beauties of the imperial business with her. He was surprised and curious about this Madame Ruan. Suddenly, he thought of something and hurriedly asked, "You just said that this ship is called Mirror Lake?" "Yes." The eunuch nodded. Chapter 1670. The reason why Song Qingshu's expression was so strange was because he vaguely remembered that Yuan Xingzhu lived near the tiny Mirror Lake in the original novel. Among Duan Zhengquan's lovers, her presence was not particularly prominent. She was not as beautiful as Li Qing Luo, nor was she as otherworldly as Dao Baifeng. Compared to Qin Homian and Gan Baobao, she did not even stand out that much. The thing that left the deepest impression on him was that she was skilled in swimming, and she was the mother of Azu and Azi. As for her family background, it was not mentioned at all. It was only mentioned in a few words that it was a large clan with very strict family rules. She became pregnant before marriage, so out of fear, she could only hand over Azu and Azi to someone else to raise, which directly led to the sister's tragedy. He never thought she would actually become the matriarch of the greatest imperial merchant in the world, the Ruan family. Originally, Song Qingshu was worried that he had guessed wrong, but when he thought about how evenly Qing Luo was the White Lotus mother, Yuan Xingzhu's current identity did not seem too surprising. According to the development of the plot, Azu and Azi should have met their mother already, right? Song Qingshu was extremely curious. He wondered if they knew about their mother's identity. Or maybe I've guessed wrong. I still need to verify it at the end of the day. Song Qingshu asked the boatman, "Do they carry passengers on such a large ship?" The boatman understood what he was trying to say. He shook his head like a rattle drum. "They're one of the greatest imperial merchants in the world. Do they lack some money to carry passengers? You can forget about it." Song Qingshu smiled. "I don't think that's necessarily the case." As they spoke, the huge ship had already approached the dock slowly. The people in the surroundings surrounded it with a hubbub. The boatman could not be bothered with the two of them. He ran towards the shore in a flurry, pushing and shoving with the others in an attempt to find a good spot. Song Qingshu could roughly guess what they were doing. It was obvious that the giant ship was docking to replenish supplies, unload cargo, and so on. They needed the help of the sailors at the dock. As the #1 imperial merchant in the world, even a little bit of it would be enough for their subordinates to snatch. Now that the shore was crowded with people, Song Qingshu was worried that Ren Yingying would be squeezed, so he protected her and sat down under the shade of a tree. Ren Yingying seemed to see through his thoughts and asked, "Qingshu, are you going to board this boat?" Song Qingshu nodded. "Yes, I was worried that a normal boat would be too rough and your body wouldn't be able to withstand the turbulence. This giant ship is just right. It will be quite stable if you live on it." Ren Yingying frowned, but the boatman said that this boat does not carry passengers. Song Qingshu gently held her hand. "So what? For my little fairy Yingying, even the biggest rules have to be broken for me." How could Ren Yingying stand such words of love? Her pretty face blushed, and she gently spat. "You are so glib." Although she pursed her lips and smiled, a trace of worry flashed through her heart. It should be known that with Song Qingshu's current reputation, he would be a distinguished guest wherever he went. At the very least, he was the Prince of Qi conferred by the Emperor of the Southern Song dynasty. The Ruan family was an imperial merchant, so how could they dare to offend him? However, in this way, his identity would be exposed. At this sensitive period, his running to Sichuan would cause a series of chain reactions, and various forces would also pay attention to him. If because of her, her lover's career would suffer a blow, then it would be too at this time. The two of them hugged each other tightly. Song Qingshu held her hand again and immediately noticed the change in her mood. After a little thought, he roughly guessed what was going on and couldn't help but smile. Ying, your body can't withstand the torment of this exquisite heart. Don't worry, it's not what you think. Seeing that at this time, the dock had almost calmed down, he pulled Rin Ying and walked in the direction of the giant ship. Why don't we make a bet? If I use your name, they will send someone to pick me up. Rin Ying was stunned. My name? Then she smiled and said, the Sun-Moon sect's power is mainly in the north. It's useful to use my name in the Yellow River area, but in the Yangtze River area, I'm afraid no one will buy it. Not to mention that the Ruan family is the world's largest imperial merchant. Of course, it's not because of the Sun-Moon sect's name. Song Qing-shu shook his head. It's simply because of your name. Ying, how is that possible? Ren Ying pursed her lips and smiled. That's why we made a bet. Song Qing-shu laughed. Well, I'll bet with you. Ren Ying's curiosity was also aroused by him. What's the bet? At night, you have to... Song Qing-shu leaned close to her ear and whispered a few words. Ren Ying instantly blushed from earlobe to neck. That's ridiculous. Song Qing-shu showed a trace of a sly smile. Don't you think I can't win? Don't you, the dignified Miss Ron, even have this little bit of confidence? Looking at her lover's bright eyes, Ren Ying couldn't help but feel excited, and at the same time, she was also aroused by him. Let's bet I don't believe you can win. Song Qing-shu secretly made a V sign and took her to the shore. Unsurprisingly, the two were directly stopped by the Ruan family guard. The Ruan family's cargo ship, unrelated people, please go away. Being stopped, Ren Ying was not at all disappointed. Instead, she looked at the man beside her calmly, waiting to see how he would end the situation. Song Qing-shu unhurriedly cupped his hands. I'm a friend of your mistress, and now I want to board the ship to pay my respects to her. The family guard sneered. There are at least 800 people who want to see our mistress, if not 1,000. Do you think you can see her just because you say so? The sailors next to them also began to jeer. Madame Ruan is famous for her beauty, and the men along the river have come up with all kinds of reasons to see her. Friend, this is too old-fashioned. The family guard fiercely glared at the sailors who jeered. You dare to make up the mistress. Do you want to die? Although the group of sailors still smiled mischievously, they dared not say anything more loudly. Song Qing-shu calmly smiled and did not argue with these people. He just slowly opened his mouth and recited, the stars in the sky shine brightly. They're always bright and always peaceful. The bamboos by the lake are lush and green, reporting peace, many joy. His voice was mixed with a very high level of internal energy. Although it was noisy at the dock, his words still spread to everyone's ears. Moreover, it was different from the domineering and ear-piercing voice of ordinary martial arts practitioners mixed with internal energy. His voice was as warm as jade, without any sense of abruptness, as if it was a very normal conversation between friends. If one's martial arts had not reached an extremely high level, they would not have realized that this was the effect produced by internal energy. Rin Ying, who was at the side, was stunned when she heard the word Ying in his words. She thought, is this what he meant by using my name to make the other party send someone to welcome me? The sailors next to them burst into laughter, and the happiest one was the boatman who had explained to them before. These years, there have been countless talents who have tried to pay their respects to Madame Ruan. Many people have also tried to recite poems and paintings, hoping to win the beauty smile, but I have never heard of anyone who has succeeded. Moreover, isn't this just a nursery rhyme? It is far worse than what those talents recite. Chapter 1671. Hearing these people making fun of her lover, Rin Ying's eyes flashed a trace of anger. If it weren't for the fact that this secret trip should not be publicized, she might have sent her subordinates to cut off these people's tongues. Although she was as gentle as water in front of her lover, she was also the holy nun of the devil cult. That year on the 5 at Gemin's Hill, she didn't even frown when she punished the cult members and sent them overseas. On the contrary, Song Qing-shu patted her hand and comforted her. Don't lower yourself to the same level as these people. Seeing that he was calm, Ren Yingying gradually calmed down. At the same time, a trace of trance flashed in her heart. She recalled the little things she got along with her lover. Sometimes she felt that he was quite hateful, but sometimes he was more gentleman than anyone else. He was really a mysterious man. At this moment, a beautiful maid suddenly came out of the boat and looked towards the shore. Who was the child who just spoke? There was no need for an answer. Everyone on the shore focused their eyes on Song Qing-shu, which had already explained the problem. Many people next to them secretly gloated, thinking that this boy would definitely suffer because of Madame Ruan's rudeness. However, what happened next made everyone's eyes fall to the ground. The beautiful maid smiled slightly. Our madam invites child to the boat for a chat. Thank you, madam, for your hospitality. Song Qing-shu was not surprised at all. He took Ren Yingying's hand and slowly boarded the boat under the shocked, puzzled, and envious eyes of a group of people around. At this time, not only those people, but Ren Yingying was also extremely shocked. She quietly asked, Qing-shu, what magic did your words have? Why did Madame Ruan send someone to pick you up as soon as she heard it? Song Qing-shu slightly smiled. These two nursery rhymes contain Madame Ruan's maiden name. The first half of the rhyme Xing means Xing, and the second half of the rhyme Zhu means you by the lake. Ruan Xingzhu, Ren Yingying silently said. So you know her? Song Qing-shu shook his head. I just heard some things about her, but I don't know her. So, just because you know her name, you can board the boat? Ren Yingying looked at him suspiciously. Because of his reputation of being a playboy, she even suspected that this Madame Ruan might be her lover's mistress. Noticing the strange look in Ren Yingying's eyes, Song Qing-shu knew that she had misunderstood and could not help but smile bitterly. What are you thinking about? I only met her daughters by chance. Back then, for unknown reasons, she entrusted her 2 daughters to someone else to raise. Each daughter has a golden lock on her. One of them says, the stars in the sky shine brightly. Forever brilliant, everlasting peace. The other says, the bamboos by the lake are lush and green. Peace is a blessing. In the original work, she had no choice but to send her daughter away because she was pregnant out of wedlock because of her strict family rules. But in this world, she was born into a royal merchant family. She had to show her face in public all day long when doing business, so she didn't feel like she was from a strict family. Moreover, she was now a senior member of the family and should have the ability to investigate the whereabouts of her 2 daughters. But she still left them outside, which was really puzzling. It turns out that this Madame Ruan has an illegitimate daughter with someone else. Ren Yingying suddenly realized. She still remembered that the eunuch had said that she was now married to the Yang family of Sichuan. Obviously, the 2 daughters who were sent away were not born with the Yang family. At this time, Song Qing-shu came over. This time I won the bet. Remember to fulfill your promise tonight. Ren Yingying blushed and spat. You were cheating. What's more, you said so much. You didn't just use my name. Song Qing-shu chuckled. The dignified saintess of Sun Moon sect also wants to act shamelessly. Ren Yingying snorted and directly turned her face away, but her heartbeat was many times faster than usual. At this time, the maidservant who led the way in front smiled sweetly and said, This way, please. Seeing that they were about to arrive, it was not convenient for the 2 to say anything. They followed behind her in silence. But in their hearts, they were secretly amazed. A maidservant was already so beautiful. They didn't know how beautiful this Madame Ruan was. It should be known that an ugly woman would not be willing to let a beautiful little girl serve her, unless she herself was more beautiful. Madam, they are here. The beautiful maidservant led the 2 all the way to the top floor and stopped in front of a beautifully decorated room. Oh, quickly invite them in. An extremely coquettish voice came from the room, causing Song Qing-shu and Ren Yingying to look at each other. They saw the doubt in each other's eyes. In their hearts, this Madame Ruan should be a woman in her 30s or 40s. But this voice was delicate and crisp like a young girl in her teens or 20s. Compared to Ren Yingying, Song Qing-shu was even more confused, because according to the voice, the people in the room said that she was Azu or Z's younger sister. Song Qing-shu had never been so impatient to see a woman's true appearance. Fortunately, he didn't have to wait for too long. The door opened very quickly. A light green silk dress, which made her slender waist even more, and a pair of big black eyes were bright and bright. They twinkled like stars, extremely lively, as if they could speak with only one eye. Her appearance was beautiful, and the corner of her mouth was like a smile, yet not a smile. "Young master, please come in." The woman slowly stood up. Her figure was tall and well-proportioned, and her voice was delicate and coquettish. "Damn, it's Lin Jilin," Song Qing-shu almost blurted out. He rubbed his eyes hard, only to realize that he had seen wrongly. But the beautiful woman in front of him, whether it was her figure, appearance, or the way she spoke, she was 70 to 80% similar to the female celebrity in the future. It gave him a kind of illusion as if it was a lifetime ago. Song Qing-shu came back to his senses. He pulled Run Yingying and slightly bowed. "I am Song Yingying, and this is my wife Qing-er." "Greetings, madam." Originally, he had made an appointment with the Southern Song dynasty to attack the Jin kingdom. In the end, he didn't act according to the plan. Because his identity was sensitive, it was not convenient to expose himself in the Southern Song dynasty, so he used a pseudonym. Hearing him call himself Nying, Ren Yingying, who was beside him, blushed slightly, but she couldn't hide the sweetness in her heart. With her intelligence, she naturally understood that Qing was named after her lover's name. "So it's Prince Song, Lady Song. You two are really a perfect match." Seeing the appearance of the two, one was handsome and tall, and the other was a stunning beauty, Madame Ruan's eyes also flashed a trace of surprise. She invited them to take a seat and ordered the maid to serve tea. "Madame is overpraising. Madame is the beautiful one." Reninging smiled sweetly. They had just met, and some compliments were too impulsive if said by a man, but the effect was very different if said by a woman. Little sister's mouth is really sweet. Receiving praise from a great beauty, Madame Ruan smiled more happily. "I wonder if you two are locals, or just passing by here?" Song Qing-shu laughed to himself. He knew that she obviously wanted to find out what he wanted to say, but she was beating around the bush. However, it was better this way. He took advantage of the situation and said, "We're going to Sichuan to visit our relatives and happen to pass by this place. So that's how it is." Madame Ruan's heart trembled. Not long ago, she had just received information that someone was going to attack them on the road. Could it be that they were here to attack? Her heart was full of thoughts, but her face was smiling sweetly. Now that the Jin and the Song dynasty are at war, it is very inconvenient to travel. It just so happens that our ship is also going to Sichuan. Why don't we go together? Chapter 1672. Gongzi is too polite. Madame Ruan pursed her lips and smiled. Suddenly, she pretended to ask casually, "By the way, where did you hear the two poems you just recited at the dock?" Song Qing-shu and Ren Yingying looked at each other, thinking that it was true. He then explained, "Madam, I heard it from two friends." "Friends?" Madame Ruan frowned. "I don't know whether Gongzi's two friends are male or female. And what are their names?" "One is called Azu, the other is called Z. They are two lovely girls." As Song Qing-shu answered, he stared closely at her eyes, trying to see if there were any flaws in her expression. Unfortunately, Madame Ruan's expression did not change. Instead, she jokingly said, "Gongzi praising other girls in front of your wife like this, aren't you afraid that your wife will be jealous?" Song Qing-shu held his breath. He did not expect that he would be caught in a trap. Ren Yingying, who was at the side, smiled and helped him out of the situation. "Madam, please don't laugh at him. He is a good person, but his luck with women is too good." Madame Ruan looked at her in surprise. With her experience, how could she not see that Ren Yingying was not angry at all? This was strange. After all, in the eyes of others, the woman in front of her was completely like a fairy. Such a woman actually acquiesced to her husband's behavior. Was she magnanimous, or was the man beside her too good? She subconsciously glanced at Song Qing-shu. He had sword-like eyebrows and starry eyes. He had a mysterious temperament, like a banished immortal. Madame Rouen could not help but smile. She thought that if she met such a man 10 years earlier, she would probably also be fascinated. Ren Ying took the opportunity to ask while talking with her, "I heard from the people on the shore that Madame's ship is going to Sichuan to do business?" Madame Rouen nodded. "Yes, every year I have to go back and forth between Jiangnan and Sichuan several times." Ren Ying seemed to remind out of kindness. "I heard that Wuxi in Sichuan has signs of treason. Now that Sichuan is in chaos, I am afraid it is not suitable for business." Madame Rouen said meaningfully, "The more chaotic a place is, the more opportunities there are. For us businessmen, the most profitable time is often in times of war." Ren Ying frowned and said, "But in the chaos of war, there are many valuables on the ship, and Madame is so beautiful. It is inevitable that there will be thieves who will have evil thoughts." Madame Rouen laughed delicately. "Our Rouen family has traveled far and wide for so many years. What kind of storms and waves have we not seen? Those who had any ideas about us, now we don't even know where their bones are fed to the fishes." From the moment he met her, she had always looked like a timid young girl. Only now did she reveal her domineering personality. When Song Qing-shu and Ren Ying returned to their rooms, Song Qing-shu couldn't help but say, "Ying, did you realize the meaning of Madame Rouen's words?" Ren Ying pursed her lips and smiled. "Oh, I thought that our first young master Song would be distracted after seeing the beautiful Madame." Obviously, Madame Rouen's words had successfully stirred up her little mood. Song Qing-shu listened and was speechless. "What are you talking about? If we really think about it, she can be regarded as my elder." However, he added in his heart, this Madame Rouen was indeed very beautiful, and there were no traces of age on her. If he didn't know in advance, it would be meaningless to say that she was a young girl in her teens or 20s. He couldn't help but think of the classic joke in the future. Lin Jieling and Duncan were the same age, but the latter already gave people the impression of an old man who had experienced the vicissitudes of life, while the former was like a young girl. Now, this Madame Rouen gave people the feeling that she was similar to Lin Jieling, whether it was her appearance, figure, voice, or the characteristic of eternal youth. Ren Ying was done joking. Then she nodded and said, "Yes, it feels as if she is deterring and warning us, as if we are those who have evil intentions. This Madame Rouen is not as delicate as she looks on the surface." Song Qing-shu smiled faintly and pulled her into his arms. "Who cares what her intentions are? In any case, when soldiers come, we will deal with them with arms, and when the water comes, we will use the earth to block it. It is fine as long as we do not change." Being hugged by him, Ren Ying's face reddened slightly, but she didn't have any meaning to his words. After all, with his current martial arts, even if he was in a dragon's pool or a tiger's den, he could come and go as he pleased. There was indeed no need to care so much. At least the room she prepared for us is not bad. Even with Song Qing-shu's picky eyes, he was very satisfied with this elegant room. Let us first talk about the matter of the bet just now. "It is still daytime now," Ren Ying exclaimed, her beautiful face somewhat pale. "So what if it is daytime?" The biggest difference between humans and animals is that there is no fixed time for estrus. "You scoundrel," in Madame Rouen's room, Madame Rouen was lazily lying on the bed. Looking at the maid who had just returned, "Père, what do you think of these two people?" The maid called Père replied, "I just brought them to the upper room. Along the way, listening to the way they talked, they don't seem like ordinary people." Madame Rouen laughed lightly. "One is like an immortal banished from the mortal world. The other is like a fairy from the ninth heaven. No matter how I look at them, they don't seem like ordinary travelers. For them to board our ship at this time, they must have other motives." Père frowned. "If that is the case, then why did Madame let them board the ship? Also, what does the poem he recited mean? Why did Madame send me to invite them up as soon as she heard it?" Madame Rouen's expression changed, coldly snorting, "Don't ask what you shouldn't ask." "Yes, Madame." Père's face was pale, obviously knowing that this mistress looked delicate on the surface, but when she was ruthless, it really made one's heart palpitate. Not long ago, I received news from Minister Han that there are people who don't want us to reach Sichuan safely. Rather than guarding against thieves for 1,000 days, it is better to let them be in a place where it is easier to supervise. Madame Ruan's eyes slightly narrowed, revealing a trace of a playful smile. It seems that I have to find an opportunity to personally investigate their background. If Song Qingshu was here and heard her words, he would definitely exclaim in surprise that this Madame Ruan was actually one of Han Xingzhou's people. In fact, this wasn't strange at all. To be the #1 royal merchant in the world, how could there not be a large tree behind them to protect them? Needless to say, the Shui family also had the shadows of the Jia, Shi, and Wang families behind them. This Ruan family was obviously relying on the support of Han Xingzhou to be able to sit on such a large scale and compete with the Shui family. To the side, Pear couldn't help but exclaim aloud, "With Madame personally taking action, it will definitely be a piece of cake." Her voice was filled with admiration, because over the years, countless things have proven that as long as this Madame personally takes action, no matter how hidden the secret is, it cannot escape from her hands. For this reason, the surrounding people couldn't help but make all sorts of guesses. For example, she is an expert in using honey traps, or she has a bewitching technique. There were all sorts of guesses, but no one knew the truth. Chapter 1673. For the next few days, Song Qingshu lived like an immortal. At night, he checked Ren Yingying's body and did the deed of husband and wife in the name of healing. Ren Yingying was shy and didn't allow him to fool around, but she couldn't stand his coaxing and pestering. Moreover, thinking that they were husband and wife, she gave in to him. During the day, Song Qingshu played the zither and flute with her. Because of the original work, Song Qingshu inevitably felt a little jealous and wanted to play the song, The Smiling, Proud Wanderer, with Ren Yingying. As the name suggested, the zither and flute ensemble was for one person to talk about love and the other to play the flute. However, thinking of the other meaning of playing the flute on the internet, Song Qingshu didn't want to play the flute, so he could only play the zither. Originally, it was very difficult for Song Qingshu to play such a difficult song with a tone-deaf musician. Fortunately, he had Zhao Min's foundation in Liao, which made Ren Yingying look at him in a new light. At first, Ren Yingying didn't know whether to laugh or cry when she heard his request. However, after seeing his rapid improvement in zither skills, she couldn't help but be tempted. Which girl didn't want to play the zither with her lover? Of course, with Song Qingshu's current zither skills, he couldn't play the smiling, proud wanderer for the time being. However, with Ren Yingying, a zither master, and she was good at teaching, all the problems were naturally solved. When can I let Zhao Min and Ren Yingying compete? They are both zither masters. Song Qingshu practiced the zither while thinking, "Oh, Jio seems to be good at playing the zither," and Miao Ruolin, in the original work, was also a zither master. Bah. In this world, she is still a little Lolita. I don't know how the mother and daughter are doing recently. Dong. Ren Yingying reached out and knocked on the table. "You need to be calm when playing the zither. What nonsense are you thinking about?" Song Qingshu was startled. Embarrassed, he suddenly asked curiously, "Can you hear what I'm thinking?" He had no doubt that a master of the zither could hear the restlessness in the zither player's music, but could they really tell what he was thinking? Ren Yingying blushed and curled her lips in dissatisfaction. "If you still think of other women while practicing, I won't teach you." Song Qingshu was shocked. How could he tell? Amidst the awkwardness, Lady Ruan's handmaiden called Pear walked over. "Prince Song, Lady Song," Song Qingshu asked. "What's the matter?" Pearl softly replied, "The journey is long, and there aren't many places to entertain ourselves on this river. So my family's madam would like to invite you over for a chat. I don't know if Lady Song is free." Ren Yingying was a little angry at Song Qingshu for letting his imagination run wild. She nodded and said, "Of course it's convenient. It just so happens that I haven't had the time to thank your madam." She got up and was about to leave. To the side, Song Qingshu furrowed his brows and said, "Just her." Now that the two of them were in someone else's territory, it would be inappropriate to let Ren Ying be alone. Pearl pursed her lips and smiled. Our family's madam is already married. It really isn't appropriate for her to frequently invite men into her room. I hope young master will forgive her. Song Qingshu couldn't help but hold his breath. She used this as an excuse, making it hard for him to say anything. After all, the culture of the Southern Song dynasty was rather harsh towards women. Don't worry. Before I met you, I was still roaming the Jianghu. Feeling his concern, Ren Ying's expression couldn't help but soften. Song Qingshu then remembered that no matter what, Ren Ying was still the saintess of the Sun-Moon sect. Her martial arts were top-notch in the Jianghu, so he nodded and said, "Then be careful." Ren Ying didn't say anything. To the side, Pearl couldn't help but mutter, "Our madam is clearly delicate, but in the end, you guys made it seem like a dragon's pool and a tiger's den." Song Qingshu was also a bit embarrassed. This was indeed a bit rude. Ren Ying smiled slightly. "Lady Pearl, let's go." The maidservant glared at Song Qingshu before leading Ren Ying away. Watching the two figures disappear around the corner, the smile on Song Qingshu's face gradually disappeared. As the saying goes, it's better to be safe than sorry. Of course, it wasn't convenient for him to reject the other party's good intentions, but he could still make some preparations in secret. Quietly concealing his tracks, he followed Ren Ying to Madame Ruan's bedroom. His qigong had long since reached the acme of perfection. Purposely concealing his tracks, how could the guards on the boat discover him? Of course, he had no interest in actually breaking into the madame's boudoir. He only hid under the eaves outside the window. Even though there was a torrential river beneath his feet, he didn't care in the slightest. He pricked up his ears and carefully listened to the sounds in the room. After listening for a while, he discovered that Madame Ruan and Ying's conversation was only about the private matters of a girl. For example, what kind of rouge and face powder to use, as well as how to dress up and make up. After listening for a while, he didn't discover anything strange. Song Qingshu also felt that he was making a big fuss over a minor issue. No matter what, it was still broad daylight. If someone saw him hanging outside the madame's room, it wouldn't look good. So, he quietly left. Of course, he didn't dare to go too far away. Instead, he went to a nearby deck. On one side, he was on guard against any sudden accidents. On the other side, he pretended to appreciate the scenery along the two sides of the river. What entered his eyes was the original beauty of the mountains and rivers. Song Qingshu's mood also gradually relaxed. These past few years, on the surface, he seemed to have unlimited scenery. In reality, he was rushing around everywhere. There was almost no opportunity like now to calm down and leisurely enjoy the scenery. Looking at Zhou as he passed by, Song Qingshu thought that this was the location of Yu Fei's former headquarters. It was a pity that the hero had already passed away. He couldn't help but sigh endlessly. Thinking of Yu Fei, he subconsciously thought of Xiao Long Nu and Li Qingluo. He didn't know if the information in the old notebook in Shui Shang's house was useful. He didn't know if he could lead them to find Yu Fei's descendants. In the next few days, Madame Ruan often looked for Ren Ying to chat. At first, the two of them thought that the other party wanted to inquire about some information. But later, they discovered that the topics they talked about were just some ordinary life topics. They didn't touch upon any sensitive information. Gradually, they relaxed their vigilance and thought that they were overthinking. Of course, from Song Qingshu's point of view, with his current level of cultivation, he could completely ignore any hidden risks. On this day, Madame Ruan invited Ren Ying over. Not long after, Pearl ran over and said that she wanted to change a room for the two of them. Song Qingshu couldn't help but frown. "We've been living well. Why do we need to change a room?" Pearl smiled and explained. "These past 2 days, our family's madam and your wife have been talking more and more agreeable. She feels that she has neglected the two of you before, so she ordered this servant to change a better room for the two of you." Song Qingshu's heart was filled with doubt, but he couldn't resist the other's enthusiasm. He could only let her be. The new room was a bit far from the previous one, but the interior was indeed much more luxurious and spacious. "Young master, Please rest well. In a moment, we will have someone send the madam over." Pearl bowed and left. Chapter 1674. Seeing that nothing happened, Song Qing-shu was completely relieved. It was not convenient to stay here and eavesdrop on the conversation of the woman's family. He returned to the new room and began to practice the music score that Ren Ying taught him these 2 days. He was so immersed in it that he forgot the time. On the other side, after Ren Ying said goodbye to Madame Ruan, she walked all the way back. However, no one on the ship told her that Madame Ruan had sent someone to change their room. She still returned to the original room. Looking at the man with sharp eyebrows and starry eyes, she could not help but smile. "Qing-shu, I'm back." If Song Qing-shu was here, he would definitely exclaim in surprise, because there was actually another exact copy of himself in the room. "You're back." The fake Song Qing-shu got up to greet her. She was naturally Madame Ruan in disguise. During this time, she did not reveal anything. When the two people relaxed their vigilance, she began to implement her plan. Over the years, the reason why she was able to find out some of the most secretive information in some impossible situations was mainly because she knew the art of disguise. Speaking of which, Azu's art of disguise was also taught by her, so her attainments in it could be imagined. This time, because of Wu Shi's rebellion in Sichuan, Han Xingzhou's current situation could be said to be difficult. He had previously sent many spies to Sichuan to see what was going on, but unfortunately, all of them did not return. In desperation, he sent out his secret weapon and let Madame Ruan personally go. These years, Madame Ruan's identity on the surface was a royal merchant, but in fact, she was the spy with the highest density under Han Xingzhou. Usually, she mainly provided financial support for him. Only in an emergency would she work as a spy. Although she was a part-time secret agent, she was better than any top secret agent. With her disguise skills and extraordinary wit, she could often find information that others could not find. It could be said that she was the last trump card under Han Xingzhou's command. This time, she still went to Sichuan as a royal merchant under the guise of doing business. However, not long ago, she received news that someone did not want her to arrive in Sichuan smoothly and that someone would attack them on the way. When Song Qing-shu and Ren Ying boarded the boat, Madame Ruan could tell that the two of them were not ordinary tourists. She subconsciously thought that they were the enemy's outpost, so she planned to beat them at their own game and investigate the enemy's deployment plan. At this moment, even though Madame Ruan was smiling, her heart was in turmoil because the way the other party addressed her just now hid too much information. She had long known that there was something wrong with the man and woman who boarded the ship. Their names were definitely fake. Song Nianying and Qing were definitely fake names. That was why she used this trick of substituting the two to see if she could get any useful information. In the end, he had given her such a pleasant surprise right from the start. It was obvious that the way they addressed each other in private could not be false. Qing-shu, in addition to the surname Song Qing-shu that he had previously assumed, could he be the Prince of Qi whose name had shaken the world these past few years? Song Qing-shu? As for Miss Qing, Song Nianying, could she be the holy nun of the Sun Moon sect, young Miss Ren? As a top secret agent, she could be said to be familiar with all the famous figures in the world. Not only was she clear about the marriage between Golden Snake Camp and Blackwood Cliff, but she was also clear about the secret alliance between Song Qing-shu and Han Xingzhou. However, although she had guessed the identity of the two, she did not have the slightest intention of relaxing. After all, during the Northern Expedition, Golden Snake Camp did not attack the Jin Kingdom as agreed, which made Han Xingzhou extremely passive. Although Golden Snake Camp had sufficient reasons to deal with the Manchurian Qing in the south, this kind of excuse was more like that of ordinary people. How could it be hidden from the insiders of the higher-ups? Because of Wu Shi's sudden rebellion, Han Xingzhou could be said to be a bird startled by the mere twang of a bough. In addition, Golden Snake Camp's previous ambiguous attitude, he really did not know whether the other party was currently an enemy or a friend. Now that Song Qing-shu suddenly appeared here, and his destination was Sichuan, Madame Ruan even suspected that the rebellion in Sichuan might be caused by him. After all, everyone knew that Ling Huchong was in love with Ren Yingying. Who knew whether Song Qingshu used Ren Yingying to incite Ling Huchong to rebel? Although Ling Huchong could pretend to be Wu Tianda for a short time, how could it be hidden for a long time? Since Han Xingzhou had given him such an important task, he naturally had to investigate everything clearly. Soon, he knew the fact that he was Ling Huchong. However, at that time, what was done could not be undone. He had fought hard to win the military power of Sichuan. If he changed the commander at the last minute, it was difficult to guarantee that Sichuan would not fall into the hands of Jia Sherdao. Therefore, he and the Wu family made the best of the mistake. He even made preparations to prevent the matter from being exposed in the future. He prepared to make a big fuss about Ling Huchong's identity as an orphan, making up that he was a descendant of the Wu family who had been lost in the early years. Anyway, as long as the Wu family did not object, others could not find out anything wrong. As the trump card spy that Han Xingzhou relied on most, Madame Ruan naturally also knew that Wu Tianda was Ling Huchong. With only 2 words, Madame Ruan not only guessed the identity of the two, but also thought of so much information. She was indeed the trump card spy. Qingshu, what's wrong with you? Seeing that her lover did not answer her, Ren Yingying could not help but feel strange. No, nothing. Madame Ruan came to herself and hurriedly changed the topic. Yingying, after getting along with you these days, what do you think of that, Madame Ruan? She deliberately called out the 2 words Yingying to test the other's reaction. As expected, Ren Yingying did not feel anything. She sat next to her and smiled slightly. Sometimes Madame Ruan is dignified and elegant, and sometimes she is as naughty as a young girl. I do not know how to describe her. Finding that she had guessed the identity of the two, Madame Ruan secretly felt proud in her heart. You do not know that I am in front of you now, Ren Yingying thought while reorganizing her words. Anyway, Madame Ruan should be a very good person. After getting along with her these days, she only talked with me about some daily life and did not make any moves to inquire about my identity. Madame Ruan was shocked in her heart. It seemed that these two were indeed on guard against me. But on the surface, she nodded and said, Yes, it seems that we have worried too much. Ren Yingying glanced at her, pursed her lips, and smiled. You do not see that Madame Ruan is beautiful and moving, so you have crooked thoughts. Hearing her evaluation of herself, Madame Ruan could not help but blush. Fortunately, she was wearing a mask, so it could not be seen. What are you talking about? She's already married. It will not be good if other people heard it. So what if she is married? Ren Yingying looked at her with a smile that was not a smile. Don't think that I do not know that you love to steal other people's girlfriends and wives. Madame Ruan was stunned. Only then did she think of the information on Song Qingshu in the intelligence database. He did seem to have this kind of hobby. Now, even his own woman was complaining about it. Thinking of the information that mentioned that he was suspected of having an unclear relationship with some married women, Madame Ruan's heart jumped. She secretly spat and scolded him half to death. However, she reacted quickly and directly followed this topic with a smile. Yes, that is why I stole you from Ling Huchong. She deliberately led the topic to Ling Huchong, naturally wanting to see some clues from Ren Yingying's reaction. Sure enough, hearing her say this, Ren Yingying's face changed. You have indeed always had a grudge about this matter. Madame Ruan frowned. Listening to the other's tone, it seemed that she was simply jealous. This was not the information she wanted to know. Just as she was planning to change the way to induce a confession, suddenly a melodious sound of a zither faintly came from afar. This is the smiling, proud wanderer? Ren Yingying's eyes flashed a trace of doubt. You are obviously here. Why is the sound of the zither coming from the other side? Madame Ruan secretly cursed in her heart. She did not expect that she would reveal a flaw so quickly. She deliberately moved the real Song Qingshu far away from here. Who knew that he would actually play the zither at this time? Maybe there is some music expert on this ship. He heard us practicing the zither every day and learned it without a teacher. Madame Ruan explained as she slowly leaned towards her. Is that so? Ren Ying suspected that it was Do Dashing. However, before she had time to react, she suddenly felt numb on her waist. Her acupuncture point had been sealed. At this point, how could she not understand what was going on? Who the hell are you? Ren Ying could not help but be shocked and angry. Madame Ruan smiled slightly. While reaching out to touch her delicate face, she said, Ying, what's wrong with you? Of course, I am your Langjun. Bah. Ren Ying turned her face away. Don't touch me. You don't let me touch you, but I still won't touch you. Madame Ruan snorted. Her next behavior was extremely frivolous. She could not help but slide her fingers across her cheek and even faintly to her neckline. Young Lady Run of the Sun Moon sect is indeed a heavenly beauty. I don't know how many men in the world want to be intimate with you. Unfortunately, they're afraid of the power of the Sun Moon sect and only dare to think about it. I did not expect that today I actually have this opportunity to touch young Lady Ren's delicate body. To achieve great success in the art of disguise, in addition to one's own skills. Acting skills are the most important. After all, one had to frequently pretend to be someone else. A slight flaw would cause one to fall short of success. Madame Ruan was a grandmaster in this field. Now, she was pretending to be a lecherous devil. Madame Ruan deliberately pretended to be a rapist. Naturally, it was not out of her own bad taste, but to completely frighten Ren Ying. After all, with her noble status, other methods might not be able to frighten her, so she could only start with chastity. Feeling the other party's fingers sliding across her skin, Ren Ying could not help but have a layer of goosebumps. She was really frightened. Qing Shu is still on the ship. He will be back soon. At that time, you will be dismembered into thousands of pieces. I advise you to rein in your horse before it's too late. I could still let bygones be bygones. Otherwise, even if you escape to the ends of the earth, you will still die without a burial place. After all, Ren Ying was the experienced and knowledgeable young lady of the holy sect. Although she was afraid in her heart, she was still calm enough on the surface, trying to resolve the current crisis. Unfortunately, her opponent this time was Madame Ruan, who had been planning for a long time. Hearing her words, Madame Ruan laughed. Your lover is now in another room. He will not come back in a short period of time. And this period of time is enough for me to do anything to you. As she spoke, she undid the button on Ren Ying's neckline. The silk brocade underwear inside was already faintly visible. Ren Ying's breathing instantly quickened. After all, she was a woman. Instinctively, she exclaimed, no. Chapter 1675. After all, Ren Ying was Ren Ying. After losing her composure, she quickly calmed down. Let's make a deal. What do you want? Gold, silver, treasures, magical weapons, or secret manuals? As long as I can do it, I can give it to you. You should know that with the current power of Sun Moon Sect and Golden Snake Camp, there is almost nothing they can't do. Madame Ruan laughed mischievously. How can Miss Ren be exempt from vulgarity? In my opinion, those vulgar things added together can't compare to a finger of First Mississippi. Your alluring body is the most perfect treasure in this world. Hearing her words, Ren Ying's cheeks flashed a captivating red, not knowing whether it was because of shame or anger. Her voice also became as cold as ice. Don't pretend. If you were really that kind of lowly rapist, why would you say so much nonsense? You would have long. She couldn't finish the rest of the sentence. She snorted and continued. Tell me, what do you want? Madame Ruan looked at her in surprise and couldn't help but start applauding. You really deserve to be the holy nun of Sun Moon Sect. Your courage and wit are admirable. In that case, I won't talk nonsense. What is your purpose in coming to Sichuan this time? Ren Ying frowned slightly. Just to relax, no purpose. She didn't know the other's origin and didn't dare to reveal anything for fear of affecting her lover's great cause. Madame Ruan snorted. That's not interesting. You're still pretending. After saying that, she stretched out her hand and tore the clothes in front of Ren Ying's chest, faintly revealing her snow-white skin. Ren Ying exclaimed with shame and anger on her face. You're courting death. As the holy nun of Devil's Sect, she usually broke people's hands and feet. At this time, her murderous aura was completely released, and there was an inexplicable deterrence. Being stared at by her eyes, Madame Rouen couldn't help but take a step back. However, she quickly reacted and found that she was actually frightened by her. She couldn't help but snort. "You're just meat on the chopping board. I could do whatever I want. How dare you show off here?" After saying that, she pretended to touch her bosom. However, to her surprise, her expression suddenly became very calm. "Aren't you afraid?" Madame Rouen asked strangely. She thought that if she was in her shoes, she would probably already be ashamed and resentful. "What's the big deal about being touched a few times by Madame?" Ren Yingying faintly said. She was indeed extremely afraid at the beginning. If something really happened, how would she have the face to continue living in this world? However, she was an extremely intelligent person after all. After the initial panic, she carefully reflected on the whole matter and slowly tasted the knack of it. Most importantly, the other party was actually able to disguise himself to look exactly like Song Qing-shu. One must know that the art of disguise was Song Qing-shu's specialty. Previously, he had discussed it with her in private. Although the art of disguise seemed simple and many people in the Jianghu knew a thing or two about it, most of them could only change their appearance and disguise themselves as someone else. They could not disguise themselves as anyone they wanted. Of course, in this world, there were still 3.5 exceptions. The other one was Murong Jingwe. He relied on vicious methods to kill his targets. By skinning them, he could barely disguise himself as the other party. However, he was already dead. Moreover, Reninging did not believe that there was anyone in this world who could silently kill Song Qing-shu. Among the other 3 people, Song Qing-shu could be counted as one, and Azu could be counted as the other. However, Azu was currently in the Liao Imperial Palace. Naturally, it could not be her. Then, it could only be the remaining person, Ruan Xingzhu, who had taught Azu the art of disguise. Thinking that they were now on her ship, the one who had the conditions to silently transfer away Song Qing-shu and replace him with someone else, other than her. Who else could it be? "Aya, you've seen through me. What a disappointment." Madame Rouen did not quibble and returned to her original delicate voice. Hearing the melancholy in her tone, completely like a little girl throwing a tantrum, Ren Yingying could not help but laugh. However, thinking of her current situation, she soon could not laugh anymore. "Don't think that I can't do anything to you just because you've seen through my identity." Madame Rouen became somewhat angry. "If you aren't afraid of being touched by a woman, then I'll find a man. There are many strong sailors on this ship." Ren Yingying's expression changed slightly. However, she quickly regained her composure. "During this time, I've been with Madame every day. I know that Madame is not that kind of person." Madame Rouen snorted. "If you really understood me, then you wouldn't be under my control right now." Just as she was about to say something, Pearl's voice came from outside the door. "That Prince Song has already begun to ask why Miss Run has not returned. It seems that he is somewhat restless." Madame Rouen knew that if she continued to delay, it would be easy for Song Qing-shu to discover her flaws. Since she could not gain anything from Ren Yingying, it seemed that she could only use a backup plan, taking off her mask and revealing her original appearance. Madame Rouen stretched out her hand and gently hooked Ren Yingying's chin. "Little girl, wait for me to deal with your lover. I'll come back and slowly play with you." Seeing that it was indeed her, the big stone in Ren Yingying's heart finally fell. Hearing this, she sneered and said, "You've imprisoned me here. I'll see how you explain this to Song Qing-shu later. You should know his martial arts." Even if all the people on this ship were added together, they would not be able to defeat one of his hands. Yes. I know that your lover is powerful." Madame Rouen was not angry at all. "But who told you that I was going to fight with him?" Question mark. Seeing her confident expression, Ren Yingying could not help but be confused. Madame Rouen very naturally began to take off her clothes in front of her, revealing her graceful and moving curves. This made Ren Yingying even more uncertain. She had heard from Qing Shu that in his hometown, there were women who did not like men and only liked women. Could this Madame Ruan also be that kind? Especially when the other began to take off her clothes, Rening Ying was even more dumbfounded. What are you doing? Don't be afraid. I'll borrow your clothes to use. Madame Ruan also casually touched her soft breasts. TSK, TSK, a young girl's body is indeed so beautiful. Even though the other was a woman, being stripped naked and being frivolous by her maid Ren Ying extremely angry. You're vulgar, Madame Ruan snorted. If you scold me again, I'll let you continue to be naked like this. However, she only said this with her mouth. In her hands, she took a piece of clothing and put it on her. Before Ren Ying could get angry, she saw Madame Ruan put on her own clothes. She could not help but be startled. You're going to? After Madame Ruan put on her clothes, she untied her hair and skillfully combed it into a hairstyle that was exactly the same as Ren Ying's. It seemed that she had secretly rehearsed it many times. Next, Madame Ruan took out a mask and put it on her face. Under Ren Ying's shocked gaze, the mask gradually changed into her appearance. Looking at the person in front of her who was exactly the same as her, Ren Ying finally understood what she was going to do. She could not help but feel a chill in her heart. Madame Ruan proudly smiled. Even if the surname Song's martial arts are high, he won't make a move on his own woman. At this time, even her voice was exactly the same as Ren Ying's. Ren Ying was in a trance. However, thinking of her lover's skills, she gradually calmed down. Song Lang has always been meticulous. You will definitely fail. Impossible. Madame Ruan was very confident in her skills. My disguise skill has already reached the peak. In addition to the appearance, even the body and smell can become exactly the same as the target. Even the person closest to me will not be able to tell the difference. These past few days, she had been inviting Ren Ying to her place every day in the name of chatting. On the surface, it seemed that she was chatting, but in fact, she was observing her speech and behavior. Some of the small details of daily life, even the frequency of her breathing, were recorded in detail. This was to ensure that nothing would go wrong. This was also why she was successful in every endeavor. Ever since she started her career, her disguise had never been seen through. Ren Ying thought that it was a pity that she did not know that Song Lang was also an expert in this field. However, speaking of this woman's disguise skill was indeed flawless. Even when she was face to face with her, she could not tell the difference. Could Song Lang really detect the abnormality? Lend me your little lover for a few days. Madame Ruan was almost dressed up. When she went out and passed by Ren Ying, she frivolously blew a breath in her ear. Ren Ying felt uncomfortable all over from her hot breath. She could not help but snort coldly. You pretend to be me. When the time comes, I don't know who to use. Thinking of the scene of her lover clinging to her every day, her snowy face gradually became dyed with a layer of red. Madame Ruan was an experienced person. How could she not understand the meaning of use? She spat. Hey, I'm but a scout for information, not to offer my body. Do you think I will be like you, shamelessly doing that kind of thing every day? Ren Ying was so embarrassed that she exclaimed aloud. These past few days, she had spent every night with Song Qingshu. Even though she had deliberately suppressed it, she would still make some embarrassing sounds. Originally, she thought that no one would discover it in the dead of night. She did not expect that it could not be hidden from the eyes and ears of those who were observant. After Madame Ruan went out, she instructed the servant, take her to a secret room and hide her. After walking a few steps, she turned around and added, treat her well. Do not neglect her. Yes, Pearl was surprised. Could it be that Madame was afraid of offending them? But now that she had already offended them, even though she had doubts in her heart, she still agreed. Meanwhile, after Song Qingshu had practiced the guqin for a while, he suddenly felt a little depressed. Calculating the time, Ying should have returned by this time. Why was it so late today? He decided to get up and go to Madame Ruan's place to find his wife. In the end, when he arrived, he found that Ren Ying had already left. He could not help but frown. Could it be that I went to the wrong place and returned to the previous room? Or perhaps something has happened. With worry in his heart, he quickly ran to the previous room. In the end, halfway there, he just happened to bump into his wife, who was slowly walking over. "Ying, you really are here." Seeing that she was safe and sound, Song Qing-shu let out a long sigh of relief. Excitedly, he went over and grabbed his wife's hand. "I thought something had happened to you." Madame Ruan was originally thinking about how to not reveal any flaws when she saw him. She had imagined many scenarios, but she did not expect that he would suddenly grab her hand. Feeling the masculine aura coming towards her from such a close distance, her heart trembled. She hurriedly gathered her thoughts and replied with a smile, "What could possibly have happened to me on this ship? I just forgot to change rooms." As she spoke, she discreetly withdrew her hand. Song Qing-shu did not mind. Ren Ying had always been shy. In public, it was very normal for her not to be too intimate with him. "I had thought that Madame Ruan was plotting against you." Chapter 1676. Madame Ruan's acting skills were superb. She didn't show any flaws when she boasted in front of others. Song Qing-shu didn't have God's perspective. Of course, he didn't notice anything unusual. He just casually teased, "What? After chatting with her for a few days, you're speaking for her? You praise her so well. Aren't you afraid that I'll have some thoughts about her? You're the first young master Song. If you really have some thoughts about her, how can I stop you?" Madame Ruan said with a bitter tone. She was very angry in her heart. Listening to what he said, she didn't know how the two of them talked about her in private. Song Qing-shu knew Ying Ying's usual temperament. Hearing her say this, he thought she was really angry. He secretly scolded himself for being a playboy. He was really looking for trouble. "Ying Ying, I'm joking with you." Song Qing-shu decided to play a rogue trick. He took her into his arms and started to love her. "Although Madame Ruan is good, how can she compare with you?" Madame Ruan was suddenly hugged by him. She felt a pair of Lushan claws wandering on her body. She couldn't help but feel ashamed and annoyed. This bastard was really as lecherous as the rumors said. Looking at his eager appearance, she didn't know how he tormented the delicate Miss Ruan. During this time, he chatted with Ren Ying. Although he had bad intentions, he was very appreciative of Miss Ren's speech and temperament. Especially because of her serious injury, there was a trace of paleness and weakness between her eyebrows, which made people involuntarily feel pity for her. Ba, what are you thinking? Now I'm being taken advantage of by him." Feeling the other party's hand going deeper into her dress, Madame Ruan finally came to her senses. As an ace secret agent, it was inevitable that there would be a honey trap. Madame Ruan was already mentally prepared for this situation. Previously, she could use clever arrangements and improvisation to make the target fantasize but not take advantage of her. But this time, the target was different. Song Qing-shu's martial arts were too high. When he wanted to hug her, she couldn't react at all. In addition, they were originally husband and wife on the ship. If she refused even a little body contact, it was easy to arouse the other party's suspicion. Originally, she wouldn't have accepted this kind of mission where she was destined to be at a disadvantage. But this time, she also knew that the situation was critical. Han Xingzhou's current situation couldn't be worse. As the saying goes, without the skin, where would the hair attach to? That was why she decided to take the risk and find out if the other party had anything to do with Wu Shi's betrayal in Sichuan. Of course, she was only prepared to let him have some brotherly desires. Naturally, she couldn't really let him take advantage of her. Sensing that the other's hand was reaching for her clothes, Madame Ruan suddenly had a bright idea and found a way to deal with it. She pressed down on his hand and asked, "How is your zither practice today?" She was not deaf. For the past few days, Song Qing-shu had been practicing the zither on the boat, so she asked Ren Ying about this matter. Because it did not involve any secret, Ren Ying did not try to conceal anything. She replied that her husband wanted to play zither and flute together with her, so she paid attention. Hearing his wife's question, Song Qing-shu said with a bitter face, "It should be okay." Madame Ruan just happened to have an excuse to escape from his evil clutches. How would she give up like this? She hurriedly said, "Play it for me. I want to see how your progress is today." Ren Ying was a competent and good teacher. When she taught Song Qing-shu, she would never be mischievous with him when she should be strict. Song Qing-shu saw her serious face and didn't dare to act rashly. Although he was somewhat reluctant, he still let go of the beauty in his arms, sat in front of the zither, and began to play. Madame Ruan listened and nodded. From time to time, she would give him some pointers and correct the small details of his fingering. As the best secret agent, she had basic skills in zither, chess, calligraphy, and painting. It might not be enough to give pointers to masters like Ren Yingying and Zhao Min, but it was more than enough to give pointers to a dabbler like Song Qing-shu. Because of the previous example of being seen through by Ren Yingying, Madame Ruan didn't dare to start asking for information as soon as she came, so as not to arouse the other party's vigilance. It was better to get familiar with him first and then slowly find opportunities. In this way, one played the zither and one gave pointers on the side. Time passed quickly and night slowly fell. Song Qing-shu glanced at the sky and impatiently ran over to hug her again. "We haven't had dinner yet," Madame Ruan pouted coquettishly, but she was secretly cursing in her heart. This person was really like a little wolf dog that couldn't be fed enough. These few days, he had tormented Ren Yingying until midnight. Why did he still have such a high desire now? Was his body made of iron? The reason why she chose to make a move today was that she was almost familiar with Ren Yingying. Secondly, she also found out that the two of them often tormented until midnight a few days ago. She estimated that after so many days, even a man made of iron would be exhausted. Therefore, she chose a time when he was the weakest so that she would be in less danger. Who would have thought that man's plan was not as good as God's? His body was completely different from ordinary people. If that person had such a good body, a man's appearance appeared in Madame Ruan's mind. Her heart couldn't help but sway. She secretly spat. What on earth was she thinking? However, Song Qing-shu hugged her and kissed her ear. His voice was a little dry as he said, "I will eat you first, then eat dinner." Madame Ruan's heart jumped when she heard this. She was already used to living like a princess. Although she was occasionally a little naughty, most of the time she was graceful and decent. In addition, with her current status, other men had to be polite to her. Even her nominal husband in Sichuan was the same. When had she ever experienced such a passionate and hormonal pressure? In addition, no matter from which aspect, Song Qing-shu was an extraordinarily handsome and beautiful man. Coupled with his world-famous identity, she was in a trance, and her mind unexpectedly rippled a little. However, Madame Ruan was after all a mature woman and an ace secret agent. Her reason quickly dispelled the ripples in her heart. She hurriedly found an excuse, "But I am hungry." Her voice was very delicate and pitiful. She also very schemingly touched her temple as if she would faint at any time. Song Qing-shu patted his head. "Look at my memory. I forgot that your body and bones are weak now. You should eat more." She hurriedly went out and ordered the servants on the boat to prepare food. Although they were guests, they were generous. In addition, they were the honored guests of the mistress, so the people in the kitchen treated them well. Soon the food was served. Madame Ruan was even very careful to put the dishes that Ren Yingying usually liked to eat. These information had been investigated clearly in the past few days when they chatted about daily life. Poor Ren Yingying didn't know her plan. She thought that these were not secrets, so she inadvertently revealed too much of her daily life habits. In fact, the strings in Madame Ruan's mind had been stretched taut. It should be known that a person's reputation was like a tree's shadow. Song Qing-shu's reputation in Jianghu was too great. Those plays in the streets even described him as a god. Therefore, she had been dealing with him with the highest level of preparation. Even the frequency of her breathing was exactly the same as Ren Yingying's. She was worried that when facing a master like Song Qing-shu, he would hear the flaws from the breath. Seeing that Song Qing-shu had not found anything unusual until now, Madame Ruan finally tried to ask for some information indirectly. "By the way, Qing-shu, how long are we going to follow this Madame Ruan?" Song Qing-shu thought for a moment. "Your body can't stand the rush on the road. Since their boat is entering Sichuan, we can keep going with it. When we reach Yibin, We will enter Min River from the Yangtze River and finally go directly to Chengdu. Sure enough, they are going to Chengdu. Madame Ruan's heart trembled. In fact, according to the current information, she had basically ruled out that the other party was coming for her. They should not be the same group of people who secretly wanted to deal with her. But she did not relax at all, because compared to the attack on the road, she suspected that these two people had a bigger conspiracy, and it was closely related to Wu Shi's betrayal in Sichuan. After we reach Chengdu, are we going to find Ling Hu Chong directly? Madame Ruan carefully threw out a question. Of course we're going to find him. Don't you also want to see him? Song Qingshu teased. Madame Ruan's heart thumped. Was Ruan Yingying still connected with Ling Hu Chong? But the intimacy between them before could not be faked. Then why did she mention Ling Hu Chong in such a tone? What was the relationship between these three people? What do you mean by this? Madame Ruan put down her chopsticks and said with some displeasure. She decided to take a gamble. She believed in a woman's intuition more. From these days of getting along with Ren Yingying, she could see the happiness in the other's eyes. This was the most impossible to fake. Maybe she and Ling Hu Chong had some past events, but that was in the past. Maybe Song Qingshu always had a thorn in his heart about this matter, so he could not help but bring it up again. Song Qingshu was startled and said somewhat strangely, Yingying, what's wrong with you today? Don't I usually joke with you like this? Madame Ruan secretly cursed. Could it be that she had guessed wrong? The relationship between these three people was too strange. Could it be that Song Qingshu asked Ren Yingying to use a honey trap to make Wu Shi betray Minister Han? At this moment, her mind had already imagined several melodramatic dramas, enough to make several TV dramas. Nothing. Maybe my body is a little uncomfortable, so my mood is a little irritable. Madame Ruan subconsciously touched her forehead and pretended to be weak. She knew that the relationship between these three people was too critical. She did not have enough information to analyze. If she spoke rashly, it would be easy to give herself away. So, she decided to take it easy first. Yingying, what's wrong with you? Let me take your pulse. Hearing that she was uncomfortable, Song Qingshu's concern was overflowing. Madame Ruan hurriedly withdrew her hand. Nothing. I will be fine after a rest. Although she could disguise her appearance, smell, voice, and even breath to be exactly the same as Ren Yingying. After all, she was not an immortal. How could she achieve the same pulse and breath? For a master like Song Qingshu, he might be able to detect abnormalities in this aspect. It was better to be safe than sorry. Let's take a look, he said in a deep voice. Last time you used the burning blood technique, the sequela is troublesome. You can't take any discomfort lightly. It turns out that she used the burning blood technique. Madame Ruan was secretly shocked. During this period of contact, she also saw that Ren Yingying's body was a little weak. She was not like the majestic holy nun of the devil cult at all. Instead, she was more like a delicate young lady. I don't know what forced her to use the burning blood technique. As an ace spy, she certainly knew what the burning blood technique was. But now was not the time to be curious about these things. The most important thing was to stop the other party from checking her body. Chapter 1677. Song Qingshu's excited expression suddenly turned into a frosted eggplant. You didn't come on this day last month. Madame Ruan secretly spat. She didn't expect him to be so careful. Which man in the world would remember the day of a woman's period? Even though she was caught off guard, she still cleverly found an excuse to dodge the question. A woman's time isn't always so regular. Sometimes it'll be messed up. Maybe I encountered too many things this month, so it's messed up. She blushed, but this time she was not pretending. She was really shy because she had to explain these things to a man. Maybe there were too many things you worried about this month, plus the tiredness of the journey, so it affected your body, Song Qingshu said with a face of annoyance. If I knew it would be like this, I wouldn't have let you do those things. Those things. Madame Ruan's heart thumped. She thought it was as she expected. Unfortunately, he didn't mention it again after saying one sentence. She was afraid of revealing a flaw. so she didn't dare to take the opportunity to ask. She didn't know that the things Song Qing-shu referred to were to let Ren Yingying be in charge of the intelligence network of the Southern Song dynasty, not Wuxi and Sichuan. Hearing that she was ill, Song Qing-shu changed his previous anxious appearance. He carefully helped her to the bed and took care of her considerately. Feeling his gentle and careful movements, Madame Ruan was in a trance. She had never met such a gentle man. Or it should be said that there would not be such a gentle and careful man in this world, due to the fact that most people in this world viewed a woman's penis as something unlucky. Men generally avoided this kind of thing. Even if there were a few exceptions, due to the lack of physiological knowledge, it was difficult to truly take care of a woman. However, Song Qing-shu came from the future. The internet had taught ordinary people all kinds of information. Therefore, in this aspect, he even knew more than the women in this world. Therefore, it gave Madame Ruan a strong sense of contrast. Looking at him busy taking care of her by the bed, Madame Ruan couldn't help but be a little absent-minded. Is he really the majestic Golden Snake King? He is so gentle. No wonder he can make so many peerless women fall in love with him. However, she quickly realized that her mentality was not right. She hurriedly stopped thinking about it and asked, "By the way, what's going on between you and that Azu Nz?" She knew that the topic in Sichuan was too sensitive. She was worried that she would expose herself if she kept asking. So she asked another question that she was very interested in. Song Qing-shu was startled. "Why are you suddenly asking this question?" "I just want to know." It was completely easy for Madame Ruan to turn on her coquettish mode. This matter was indeed one of the biggest doubts in her heart these days, but she just couldn't find a reason to ask about it. Now it was just the right time to use Ren Yingying's identity to inquire about it. Who knew that Song Qing-shu just stared at her in a daze and did not reply? Madame Ruan turned her face away. "Why are you looking at me like that?" "I feel like you're acting a little strange today," Song Qing-shu replied. Madame Ruan's heart thumped, and she forced a smile. "What's so strange about it? On normal days, you rarely act like this." Song Qing-shu clicked his tongue in wonder. Madame Ruan just remembered that through this period of contact, Ren Yingying was the kind of shy and arrogant person who cared about face. It was indeed unlikely for her to act like this. However, she reacted quickly and quickly made up for it. "Humph, I was almost fooled by you. Don't change the topic." His plan was seen through. Song Qing-shu smiled awkwardly. "It doesn't matter. She's just a confidant. You were there when I met Z. As for Azu, she and I are also good friends." Thinking of what happened to Liao, he actually did not know whether he and Azu were still friends or not. Madame Ruan was not very satisfied with this answer. She actually wanted to ask to what extent their relationship was, such as whether they had slept together. However, she was afraid that Ren Yingying actually knew about it. If she asked, she would expose something. After struggling for a long time, she finally found a suitable way to test him. "Song Qing-shu, you have to be responsible for what she did. You can't let her follow you without knowing why. You'd better think of a way to give her a status." Song Qing-shu smiled bitterly and said, "I'll give her an explanation after she completes this mission." Hearing that he did not deny giving her a status, Madame Ruan was not happy at all. Instead, her heart sank. It seemed that they really had sex. She did not know whether it was Z or Azu. Suddenly, Madame Ruan was a little embarrassed. In this way, she should be his elder, but now she had to play his wife. It was really a mess. Soon it was late at night, and it was time for Song Qing-shu to go to bed. Madame Ruan could avoid being intimate with him using Tiangui as an excuse, but she could not stop sleeping with him. Of course, this was also within her expectation, so she was not too flustered. However, after Song Qing-shu went to bed, he skillfully held her in his arms. His hands were dishonestly moving around, making her breath chaotic and her heart beat faster. This bastard was really a demon. He clearly said that Tiangui was here, but he was still so dishonest. However, thinking of how they were like glue before, she knew that this was probably the norm. If she kept refusing, it would be easy to reveal a flaw. "Forget it, I will bear with him first. Anyway, no one knows about this. He will only think that he is touching his wife." Madame Rouen clenched her teeth and secretly spat. For this task, she really put in a lot of effort. Hey, it seems to be a little softer, a little bigger. Song Qingshu's vague voice came from under the quilt. So annoying. Madame Rouen's heart was in her throat. However, seeing that he just casually mentioned it and did not really doubt it, she was relieved. However, although she could hide it from others, she couldn't hide it from her own heart. Thinking about how he had taken advantage of her so many times, she couldn't help but feel angry. On the other hand, she was a mature woman and also had normal emotions and desires. Under the skillful and gentle skills of the man beside her, she shamefully found that she actually had feelings. Thinking that she had been provoked by this little man who was much younger than her, she was extremely embarrassed, especially when she thought of the unclear relationship between him and Azu and Z. It was a kind of moral taboo, but some things were like this. The more you suppress it, the more difficult it is to suppress it. Suddenly, Madame Rouen's body stiffened. Being so close to him, she could clearly feel the drastic changes in the man's body. She could not help but secretly spit. I really wronged him say that he is a little man. Knowing that she couldn't let him continue, Madame Rouen reached out to push him away. Don't make trouble, who knew that Song Qingshu would take her hand and move closer to her ear, his voice a little hoarse. Madame Rouen was embarrassed and anxious. I already said that it is inconvenient for me to. Previously, in order to be absolutely safe, she even took some cotton cloth dyed with some blood and put it inside. If the other really wanted to take off her dress, this would be the last big weapon. She even somewhat looked forward to that scene, thinking, at that time, I will see whether you will be splashed with cold water. Unfortunately, Song Qingshu did not have the intention to take off her dress. Instead, he pulled her into his arms, making Madame Rouen confused. It was destined that they would not be able to be intimate, so what was the point? However, she quickly understood what the other party wanted to do, because a force came from above and pressed her head down into the quilt. Madame Rouen tried to get up, but the strength of the other party's hand could not help but be doubted. She could not help but feel ashamed and angry. What do these two people play all day long? Looking at the other party's proficiency, it was obviously not the first time they did this. She never thought that Ren Yingying, who was respected and revered by thousands of people in Jianghu, would actually do such a thing for him. Thinking of the usual noble and elegant appearance of Ren Yingying in front of people, it was really impossible to combine the two images together. Thinking of this, Madame Rouen even somewhat vented her anger on her. If she did not play so crazily with her husband, would she be in such an embarrassing dilemma? Looking at this posture, the two people usually played this kind of verbal game. What reason could she find to refuse at this time? She calculated thousands of times and prepared for everything, but she did not expect such a thing. But if she did not refuse, would she really have to? Madame Rouen's heart trembled. She came to find information, but so far, she had not found any useful information. In the end, she let him take advantage of her first. It was really going for wool and coming home shorn. Yingying, what's wrong with you? Seeing that his wife did not move, Song Qingshu could not help but start to urge. Madame Rouen was really going to go crazy. She had experienced great storms and dealt with all kinds of troublesome situations, but all the previous situations added together were not as difficult as the current situation. Am I really going to die here today? Madame Rouen simply wanted to cry, but had no tears. For the first time, she had doubts about using the art of disguise to inquire about information. Anyway, he does not know my true identity, why not? Madame Rouen made a fierce psychological struggle. No, he has that kind of relationship with Azu and Azi. How can I still with him? And Ren Yingying also knows about my art of disguise. If the two of them compare their statements afterwards, do I have to kill Ren Yingying to silence her? But behind her is the Sun Moon sect, and Song Qingshu are not easy to provoke. How would they dare to kill her? But if I don't kill her, while Madame Rouen was in a dilemma, Song Qingshu might have directly become impatient from waiting. He directly reached out and pressed her head down. Her eyes suddenly opened wide. She was ashamed and resentful. Just as she was about to submit helplessly, the sound of fighting suddenly came from outside. Huh? Song Qing-shu was obviously also a little distracted, and the strength of his hand decreased a little. Madame Ruan hurriedly broke free and poked her head out from under the quilt. What happened? Chapter 1678. Hearing the other party's order to continue, Madame Ruan almost fainted from anger. Firstly, she had thought that she had a chance to escape this calamity, but knew that the other party had no intention of stopping at all. Secondly, she was the owner of this ship. The sounds of fighting outside were obviously the sounds of someone attacking. Without her overseeing the situation, her side's counterattack would certainly be incomparably chaotic. Are you really going to stand by and watch? Madame Ruan bit her lip and regretted her actions this time. Not only was she taken advantage of, but she was also attacked by the thieves. Misfortune never comes alone. Song Qing-shu smiled faintly. The Ruan family has been in Jianghu for so many years and is the first royal merchant in the world. How can they not deal with such a small disturbance? Madame Ruan secretly complained. If it was in the past, she naturally wouldn't worry about being attacked by the thieves. First, she was in charge of the situation, and second, she had Han Xingzhou behind her, so she could use the power of the government. But now the situation was very different. Han Xingzhou couldn't protect himself now, and according to reliable information, the people who attacked them were likely to have Jia Shidao behind them. Naturally, it was far from the small fights in the past. Seeing that she was lost in thought, Song Qing-shu couldn't help but laugh. What? After talking to her a few times, you think of her as a friend? Madame Ruan thought quickly and quickly thought of an excuse. We don't have a ship to take. They invited us on the ship and treated us with good wine and food along the way. Now that they are in trouble, if we stand by and watch, won't it be too unreasonable? Song Qing-shu nodded slightly. What you said is somewhat reasonable. The reason why he didn't take action was mainly because he wanted these thieves to test this Madame Ruan, because his sixth sense told him that Madame Ruan was not so simple. However, the sound of fighting outside showed that the enemy had a big advantage, which was a little beyond his expectation. When he was hesitating, the door was suddenly kicked open from the outside. A man with a knife scar holding a torch rushed in and saw the two people on the bed. When he saw Madame Ruan's blushing, bashful, and beautiful appearance, his entire person immediately revealed a state of being enchanted by her beauty. He directly rushed over while drooling. As for the pretty boy next to her, he simply did not bother to look at him and casually dealt with him with a knife. With a loud bang, the man with a knife scar flew out at a speed 10 times faster than when he came. On the bed, Song Qing-shu began to get up and tidy up his clothes. I didn't want to get involved in this, but these people have to provoke me. Madame Ruan was stunned. Although she knew that Song Qing-shu was very good at martial arts, she only knew it from the information and hadn't seen it with her own eyes. Until she saw him just now, she was so shocked that she couldn't describe it. No, it was not accurate to say that she saw him make a move. To be precise, she did not see Song Qing-shu make a move before that person was sent flying. With that kind of speed, even a cow would be crippled. How'd he do it? Madame Ruan opened her mouth and had a silent question. Speaking of which, she was also a knowledgeable person. It wasn't that she hadn't seen masters, but those masters she had seen before were not worth mentioning compared to him. What are you still doing? Don't you want to get up? Song Qing-shu turned back and saw her surprised look. He couldn't help but laugh. Oh, okay. Madame Ruan's face turned red. She thought that she was like a little girl. Whether his martial arts was good or not, what did it have to do with her? After they put on their clothes, Song Qing-shu walked out with her. As they walked, he said in a deep voice, listening to the sound outside, most likely the dust has settled. It's really beyond my expectation. Why is the Ruan family's defense so weak? Madame Ruan smiled bitterly, but she couldn't say anything. At the same time, she was also worried. Could it be that the guards on the ship were all destroyed? The two came to the edge of the deck. Madame Ruan wanted to rush out, but she was pulled by Song Qing-shu into the shadow around the corner. Let's see the situation first. Madame Ruan also realized that rushing out like this was too rash, so she didn't object. After the two hid, they looked over to the side of the deck. Now, there were many people gathered in the middle of the deck. Many of the Ruan family's servants and guards were lying in a pool of blood. The rest were basically kneeling on the ground with their hands over their heads. Obviously, they had been restrained. Around them stood a circle of valiant thieves. Each of their temples were bulging. It could be seen that they were all masters of hard body skills. Dogs of the Zhongli gang, Madame Ruan suddenly said through gritted teeth. Song Qingshu was startled. You know them? Madame Ruan's heart jumped. Only now did she realize that she had exposed a flaw in her anxiousness. But on second thought, Ren Yingying was originally a princess of the underworld. It was reasonable that she had seen that person before. So, she explained, the one with the goatee is the military advisor of the Zhongli gang, Bei Haishu. I met him once by chance. I heard that he is the most cunning and deceitful person. Song Qingshu looked in the direction she pointed and saw a lean middle-aged man. That goatee was especially eye-catching. Is this Bei Haishu? He looked somewhat familiar. In fact, he wasn't sure if he had seen him before. After all, at his position, people like Bei Haishu could only be considered a small character. It wasn't worth his effort to remember him. At this time, Bei Haishu was staring at the servant girl kneeling in front of him. He coldly asked, "Speak, where did Madame Ruan go?" Song Qingshu's eyes were sharp. He recognized that the servant girl was Pei. She turned her face away and didn't respond. Madame Ruan is not here. Song Qingshu couldn't help but feel that it was strange. Then, he realized why the Ruan clan didn't organize any effective resistance. It was because they didn't have a leader. At this time, Bei Haishu saw that Pei didn't respond. He immediately slapped her across the face. Lowly servant girl, I gave you face, but you don't want it. Pei, Madame Ruan subconsciously cried out. Although she and Per were master and servant in name, in reality, they were like friends. Seeing her being bullied like this, she was naturally shocked and angry. Who's there? Bei Haishu and the group of people suddenly turned around and looked in the direction of the two's hiding place. Song Qingshu had no choice but to bring Ren Yingying out of the shadows. However, he didn't go near those people. He didn't want Ren Yingying to be in the slightest bit of danger. When Pei saw Madame Ruan, her eyes revealed a look of surprise. She subconsciously wanted to call her Madame. Luckily, her reaction was fast enough, and she forcefully swallowed her words. Who are you? Bei Haishu asked with a frown. He felt that the man and woman in front of him were somewhat familiar. Unfortunately, he couldn't remember where he had seen them before. As he asked, he called for his subordinates to quietly move closer, faintly surrounding the two in the middle. Song Qingshu calmly replied, Who I am is not important. What's important is that you have disturbed my elegant mood. I'm very angry. He indeed had a reason to be angry. Any man who was interrupted at such a crucial moment would find it hard not to be angry. Madame Ruan, who was to the side, heard the two words elegant mood and couldn't help but blush. However, right now she was more concerned about how the situation would develop next. Although Song Qingshu's martial arts were high, the opponents were numerous and every one of them was an expert. It should be known that when she went to Sichuan this time, the people who accompanied her were all experts from her clan. Unexpectedly, they were defeated so quickly. Other than the fact that she wasn't in charge, the enemy was too strong. She even suspected that these people weren't members of the Zhongli gang, but some evil sect experts in disguise. Are you angry? The group of people acted as if they had heard a great joke. Many people jeered. Who the F***CK do you think you are? Come over and kneel here. Otherwise, don't blame me for being blind. Yo, the little girl next to me is quite handsome. Let her come over and serve me. If she serves me well, maybe I will spare your dog life. Yin Lao-san, you want to monopolize such a beautiful girl. Aren't you too black-hearted? That's right. How can it be enough to serve you alone? No matter what, he has to serve all of us comfortably before he can spare him. Such a delicate little girl. There's so many of us. Aren't you afraid that she will break? It doesn't matter if she breaks, but what if the people behind us can't play with her? That's easy. Anyway, This ship has everything we need. At worst, we can stay on this ship and play slowly. Ha ha ha. Although Madame Ruan wasn't reneging, she was still trembling with anger at this group of people's vulgar teasing. Originally, she had thought that Song Qing-shu was quite lecherous. However, compared to these villains, he was more gentlemanly than a gentleman. Song Qing-shu's face had completely sunk. His voice was colder than ice. Originally, I have always been easygoing and don't like to kill people. But today, you actually offended her like this. He hadn't finished speaking when he was interrupted. That person taunted and ridiculed. So what if we offend you, pretty boy? Madame Ruan looked at the man next to her with some worry. His expression was solemn. If you people dig out your own eyes and tongues, I can spare your lives. Hearing his words, the group of people suddenly seemed to hear the biggest joke in the world. Where did this idiot come from? We are right here. If you want our lives, come and take it yourself if you have the ability. They indeed had enough confidence. After all, this time they were accompanied by some famous masters in the underworld. Even the long-established Ruan family collapsed under their attack. What was this pretty boy in front of them? There were some cautious people among them. However, they couldn't detect any signs of Jinshi from the person in front of them. Obviously, he was an arrogant person who had read too much. Wanted to take it? Good, good, good. Song Qing-shu slowly walked forward. Every time he said the word good, he clapped his hands. When he clapped his hand for the first time, the faces of those masters who were previously arrogant and insufferably arrogant all changed. This was because an invisible wave of air spread out from his surroundings. This wave of air was so terrifying that it made people feel despair. The group of masters all vomited blood and fell to the side. After the first good, more than half of the mysterious bandits fell. Only a few with profound skills stood there bitterly with blood dripping from the corners of their mouths. After the second good, only Bei Haishur was left standing. After the third good, Bei Haishur violently vomited a mouthful of blood. It was as if all the bones in his body were broken. He fell to the ground like a pile of mud. At the last moment of his life, his mind was unprecedentedly clear. In this world, there was probably only one young man who had the ability to kill so many masters without a sound. You are... Unfortunately, before he finished speaking, he had already breathed his last. As for the others who came with him, they had already stopped breathing after the first 2 rounds of shockwaves. Moreover, each of them had their eyes burst open and blood flowed from the corners of their mouths. They died extremely miserably. Song Qing-shu glanced at Bei Haishur indifferently. You actually practiced the I Jing Jing. No wonder you could last 3 breaths. Chapter 1679. Although Song Qing-shu did not remember whether he had seen Bei Haishur in this world, he knew that he was a moderately powerful boss in the way of the gallant. It should be said that apart from the group of abnormal people in the Isle of Heroes, Bei Haishur was also a first-class master in the Central Plains. Many TV series even made him the final boss. As for how he knew the muscle-bone strengthening scripture, Song Qing-shu could not remember clearly and was not interested to know. Speaking of which, the Sanskrit version of muscle-bone strengthening scripture is still in my hands. I have not had time to translate it. Song Qing-shu suddenly remembered that he had used a trick to get the muscle-bone strengthening scripture. Unfortunately, there were too few people in this world who knew Sanskrit, so he could not practice it at all. He only obtained the Shinzu scripture written with a hidden potion. In addition, Song Qing-shu had learned the Taishan scripture, and his power had reached the half-immortal realm, so he was not so interested in the muscle-bone strengthening scripture. However, this time he could feel the extraordinariness of the muscle-bone strengthening scripture from Bei Haishur. It seemed that it was necessary to study this unique skill. He pondered for a while, but the people around him were petrified on the spot. It should be known that Bei Haishur and the group of mysterious thieves suddenly attacked the ship. Each of them was skilled in martial arts and ruthless, so the guards on the ship were quickly defeated. It should be known that the accompanying guards were all carefully selected by the Ruan family. But in front of those devils, they were all like 3-year-old children. However, it was this group of devil-like people who were all killed by him with 2 steps and a few claps of his hands? Many people even rubbed their eyes in disbelief. Looking at the back of the man in front of her, Madame Rouen suddenly felt as if there was a towering mountain in front of her. She was shocked when the thief in the room was sent flying, but compared with the scene in front of her, it was not worth mentioning. Compared with the ordinary guards, she even saw a deeper level. It should be known that in addition to those mysterious people, there were many guards of the Rouen family around. In the end, only those thieves died, and the people of the Rouen family were not hurt at all. This level of internal force control was simply incredible. She had heard many rumors about Song Qingshu in the past, especially the versions that were circulated among the ladies in the boudoir. She originally thought it was just a rumor, but she didn't expect it to be even more exaggerated than the rumors. Suddenly, she felt a deep chill in the depths of her soul. It should be known that these people had been killed by him for teasing Ren Yingying, but she had imprisoned her. If he found out about this, thinking of the possible consequences, Madame Rouen could not help but shudder. "What's wrong? Are you cold?" At this moment, a gentle voice came from beside her. She looked up and found that she had already returned to her side. "No, nothing," Madame Rouen answered somewhat unnaturally. If one were to say that she had a playful attitude when she pretended to be Ren Yingying before, now she was treading on thin ice. These people deserve to die for polluting Yingying's ears. Song Qingshu snorted coldly. It was obvious that he still held a grudge against those people's filthy words. Madame Rouen did not know how to respond. She could only vaguely respond with a hum. Song Qingshu thought that she was frightened and did not mind. Holding her waist, he walked in front of Pearl, who was still kneeling. "Where did your family's madam go?" This was also the thing he was most confused about. Such a big thing had happened on the ship, and yet she had not appeared. If she was here, Bei Haisher and the others might not be able to control the entire ship so easily. Song Qingshu's power was still lingering, so Pearl did not dare to not answer. She subconsciously looked at Madame Rouen beside him, but her reaction was fast enough. She quickly shifted her gaze. "Our family's madam has something to do and has gone into the city." "Enter the city?" Song Qingshu frowned, thinking that this Madame Rouen really had many secrets. To actually secretly enter the city, he did not know what important matter she had to do. "I'll leave the rest to you." Song Qingshu casually waved his hand, cutting off the restraints on her body. At the same time, he released her acupuncture points. He clearly had no interest in taking over the mess on the ship. It was better to let them deal with it themselves. "Thank you, young master, for saving us." Pearl hurriedly bowed and thanked him. The rest of the Rouen family guards also kowtowed. Song Qingshu hugged Madame Rouen and turned to leave. He casually waved his hand, leaving only his gradually disappearing back to the crowd. Seeing her own family's madam nestling in his arms, Pearl opened her mouth, but in the end did not dare to say anything. After returning to the room, Madame Rouen finally mustered up the courage to ask, "Why didn't you leave them alive? These people are all extraordinary. How could Amir Legang have so many experts?" Song Qingshu frowned. "I was already suppressing a bellyful of anger at the time. On top of that, they dared to use vulgar language, so I was too lazy to care so much." Madame Rouen was startled. She did not expect it to be the result of a moment of impulse. "Forget it. Don't care about that. In any case, they did not come for us." Song Qingshu picked her up and walked to the bed. "Ah," Madame Rouen exclaimed, not knowing what to do for a moment. "Let's continue to sleep." Song Qingshu kissed her lips, then hugged her and shrunk into the quilt. Madame Rouen's cheeks were crimson. How could she not understand the meaning of the word sleep? But she had just seen the side of him killing without blinking an eye. The appearance of a killing god constantly lingered in her mind. There was an inexplicable sense of awe, making her unable to resist. The deep worship and submission to the strong were things that were imprinted in the bones of women. Then, Madame Rouen felt her whole body become dizzy. She did not know whether it was a dream or reality. The next morning, Madame Rouen woke up very early. Looking at the man sleeping soundly beside her, she could not help but cover her cheeks with her hands. "What have I done?" It's so shameful. She thought of all her schemes. Although she had preserved the innocence of the lower part, she had lost the upper part. Thinking of her actions last night, she felt that it was simply inconceivable. Ying, after teaching for so long, how come your skills have deteriorated? Sensing the movement beside him, Song Qingshu sleepily opened his eyes and said with a smile that was not a smile, "Hey, don't say it." Madame Ruan was suddenly embarrassed. At this time, her expression was not fake, but revealed naturally. "Haha, I'll sleep a little longer." Song Qingshu laughed and turned over to sleep again. Madame Ruan's face was hot. She hurriedly got up, put on her clothes, and walked out. Song Qingshu only thought that she was going to wash and did not take it to heart. On the way back to her own boudoir, Pearl was already waiting there. Seeing her come in, she was pleasantly surprised and said, "Madam, I have always wanted to find you, but I was afraid that it would arouse the other party's suspicion, so I did not dare to go." Madame Ruan nodded and took the lead to ask, "Is Miss Ren okay?" She was worried that the disturbance last night would affect Ren Ying. If something happened to her, her whole ship would probably be buried with her. "I hid her in the secret room. Those people did not discover it," Pearl hurriedly replied. Madame Ruan was still worried and directly ran to open the secret room. Seeing Ren Ying sitting inside, she let out a sigh of relief. Seeing that it was the two of them who came in, Ren Ying's face flashed a trace of disappointment. Brother Song actually did not discover. Pearl proudly raised her chin. "Humph, our family's Madame's disguise technique is unparalleled in the world. How could it be discovered?" Ren Ying suddenly thought of something and looked at Madame Ruan strangely. "Last night, you and Brother Song slept together?" Madame Ruan subconsciously touched her cheeks that were still a little sore, and then said angrily, "It turns out that the dignified Miss Ren's thoughts are also so dirty. Since I dared to pretend to be you, naturally I was completely prepared. I used Tiangu Wei as an excuse, so naturally I did not have to worry about what the surname Song would do." She also did not know why she had to explain so clearly in front of the two of them. Perhaps it was to cover up the apprehension and weakness in her heart at this time. Seeing that her explanation was reasonable and well-founded, the cloud of doubt between Ren Ying's eyebrows gradually disappeared. She faintly said, "In the end, paper cannot cover fire. You are on your own." Seeing her graceful and calm appearance, Madame Ruan did not know why, but her heart felt a little guilty. She hurriedly left the secret room and then told Pearl, "You must take good care of Miss Ren. You must not let even the slightest bit of harm come to her." "I know." Pearl nodded nervously. Thinking of Song Qingshu's demon-like figure last night, she shuddered. How were the losses last night? After confirming Ren Ying's safety, Madame Ruan then began to calculate their own losses. "It is not optimistic. Nearly 30% of the guards died, and even more were injured," Pearl replied with a frown. "I was careless. My attention was all on the two of them, and I did not make the necessary preparations," Madame Ruan sighed. "From today onwards, strengthen the patrols day and night. Be vigilant against any ship that approaches the Mirror Lake. When we reach Jiangling, transfer some people from the Ruan family's branch over. Remember, you must choose those with seniority to prevent others from sneaking in." Madame Ruan then said, "Oh yes, remember to invite Prince Song over later. Yesterday, he helped so much. If I, as the master, do not appear, it will inevitably arouse his suspicion." Hearing her instructions, Pearl said with some surprise, "Madame plans to return?" After experiencing last night's events, she was not used to the situation of lacking a backbone. Hearing that Madame was going to restore her identity, how could she not be happy? Madame Ruan shook her head and began to change her clothes. "It is only temporarily stabilizing him. After this, we still have to pretend to be Miss Ren. Otherwise, he will immediately know that something has happened to Ren Ying, and we will be finished." "That is true," Pearl nodded hurriedly. At this time, Madame Ruan thought with some hatred that she had not yet found any connection between them and Wu Shi's betrayal. How could she just give up like this? Otherwise, wouldn't she have sacrificed so much for nothing? Thinking of some of the scenes from last night, Her whole body became somewhat hot. When Pearl arrived outside Song Qingshu's room, he had already woken up. Just as she was wondering why Ren Yingying was not there, she heard Madame Ruan's invitation. Madame Ruan, Song Qingshu was planning to use yesterday's events to probe her background. Seeing this, he accepted the invitation. When he entered Madame Ruan's boudoir, she had already removed Ren Yingying's makeup and restored her original appearance. Madame Ruan saw the dignified man in front of her and could not help but feel her heart skip a beat. She hurriedly suppressed the strange emotions in her heart and revealed her usual smile as she stepped forward and bowed. "Young master, thank you for your help last night. Young master's great kindness, I do not know how to repay you." Chapter 1680. Madame Ruan never thought that he would say such a thing. Originally, she was embarrassed about yesterday's incident. Hearing this, her face instantly turned red. Before she could think of how to respond, Song Qingshu already laughed. "I'm just joking with Madame. I hope Madame doesn't mind." Madame Ruan was scared half to death. Snappily, she said, "I hope young master can conduct himself with dignity." Song Qingshu smiled slightly. Obviously, he did not take her words to heart. He directly changed the topic. "I don't know why Madame was not on the ship at such a dangerous moment last night. I went into the city to handle some private matters. I didn't expect that these people would take advantage of the situation." Madame Ruan was also depressed. She had just carried out her plan, and the other side had already attacked. Seeing that she had no intention of doing anything, Song Qingshu did not ask further. He could only say, "The enemy's timing is so accurate. Madam, be careful that there's a traitor on the ship." Madame Ruan nodded. "Thank you for reminding me. I will pay attention." Being reminded by the other side, she also felt that there was a possibility of a traitor. She decided to order Pearl to investigate later. In addition, she would strengthen the security measures in this room to prevent any accidents from happening to Ren Yingying. "Right, I saw that the people yesterday were all extraordinary. They did not look like ordinary robbers who kill and rob. Does Madame Ruan know why they came to you?" Song Qingshu asked while staring at her. He tried to get some information from her expression. He had always suspected that this Madame Ruan was not simple. Unfortunately, there was too little effective information. He had no way to judge. Seeing him staring at her, Madame Ruan's heart couldn't help but skip a beat. It was as if she could feel his burning gaze sweeping over her skin, causing her entire body to tremble. Finally, she noticed that his gaze fell on her red lips and subconsciously thought of the situation from last night. On the side, Song Qingshu was inexplicable. Why did this Madame Ruan suddenly show an expression of infinite shyness? Of course, no matter how narcissistic he would not think that a mature woman who he had only met a few times would fall in love with him. After all, no matter how he looked at her, she was not that kind of woman. But to be honest, this Madame Ruan's bashful appearance was really somewhat beautiful. Her skin was fair and beautiful. Her waist looked thin and soft, and her red lips were also small and moving. With one look, one could tell that she was an indescribably wonderful, understanding flower. Her husband was really lucky with women. Replying to young master's question, "Your concubine also doesn't know what's going on. I also don't know how I've provoked these demons," Madame Ruan hastily replied after much difficulty. Oh, Song Qingshu saw that he couldn't get anything out of her, so he had to start from another angle. "By the way, who is your husband's family?" This was also what he was most curious about. According to the introduction, she seemed to have a marriage alliance with the Yang family of Chuan. What about Duan Zhengshan? What about Zi and Azu? This was not a secret, so Madame Ruan did not mind answering. "Your concubine's family is the Yang family of Chuan. His name is Yang Zhenzhou. He is currently the Xingyuan prefecture judge and the Dan army commander." "So, it is General Yang." Song Qingshu showed a strange expression. He had previously heard that the Yang family of Chuan was a wealthy family. At that time, he did not have any idea, but now he understood. The Xingyuan prefecture was also the famous Hanzhong in history. The Dan army was also the first prefecture of Shishu and was in charge of the gateway to the north of Chuan. This Yang Zhenzhong controlled these two places and was definitely an important figure in the officialdom of Chuan. Recently, Chuan doesn't seem to be peaceful. Song Qing-shu intended to test her again. Madame Ruan was worried that she could not find an excuse to inquire about the relationship between him and Ling Huchong. She seized the opportunity and said, "Yes, there are rumors everywhere. It is said that Wu Shi of Chuan intends to commit treason." Now, some people in the entire Great Song are in a state of panic. Since that is the case, why did Madame enter Chuan at this time? Aren't you afraid of being a sheep walking into a tiger's mouth? Song Qing-shu asked. Madame Ruan secretly spat. It was obviously she who wanted to ask him, but in the end, he turned the tables on her. But she had to answer, "Who asked my husband to still be in Chuan? Chuan has been cut off from the outside world for a long time. I want to go see if he is safe." Song Qing-shu curiously said, "But I heard that Madame is doing business with imperial merchants this time. There should be a large number of goods to be transported to Chuan. Of course, there must be a cover." Madame Ruan had already recovered her natural state at this time. Otherwise, swaggering into Chuan like this will easily attract attention. But the facts have proven that it has already attracted people's attention. Song Qing-shu thought, you entering Chuan with such great fanfare is considered low-key. Who could have expected it? Madame Ruan faintly sighed and immediately asked, "Young master is experienced and knowledgeable. Do you know the origin of these people?" Song Qing-shu spread out his hands. "Madam, as the #1 imperial merchant in the world, you could be considered experienced and knowledgeable after traveling extensively. How would I dare to show my slight skill in front of an expert? You are so annoying. Young master, why do you have to tease me?" Madame Ruan subconsciously blurted out. Immediately after, her whole person was stunned. This kind of acting coquettishly was a bit too strong. In fact, her original temperament was somewhat naughty. It was normal to use some means like this. But it just so happened that the two of them yesterday. So because of her guilty conscience, she always felt that this was very shameful. But when Song Qing-shu heard this, his heart swayed. Her voice was originally delicate and somewhat childlike. If she deliberately acted coquettishly like this, even a man made of iron would melt into juice. I only know that the leader is the military advisor of Chang'e Gang, Bei Haisher. As for the rest, Madam needs to investigate it yourself. Song Qing-shu decided to reveal some things to her. After all, he and Ying still had to stay on this ship for a period of time. It was still useful to let her specifically improve the security defense. "Many thanks, young master." Madame Ruan felt a burst of disappointment in her heart. She already knew that it was Bei Haisher yesterday. Looking at her elegant and dignified appearance, Song Qing-shu's heart moved. He suddenly asked, "That's right, I don't know if Madame knows a person called Duan Zhengchun." Madame Ruan's heart jumped, but on her face, she smiled sweetly and said, "The Supreme Court's Jinan Wang. If you know this person, why did young master suddenly mention him?" "Nothing, I just suddenly thought of him." From her face, he could not see any flaws. Song Qing-shu secretly sighed. This woman was not simple. Following this, the two of them were like a pair of foxes probing each other, chatting here and there. Unfortunately, the two of them did not obtain any useful information. When Song Qing-shu stood up to leave, Madame Ruan also stood up to let Pearl see her off. "I am a married woman, so it is not convenient for me to see you off. I hope young master can forgive me. Pearl, see young master out." Song Qing-shu nodded slightly and followed Pearl out. However, after walking for a while, he realized that they were not on the way back. He could not help but ask, "Pearl, did you go the wrong way?" Pearl pursed her lips and smiled. "I didn't go the wrong way. Young master, please follow me." Song Qing-shu's heart was filled with doubt. However, he was skilled and daring, so he was not afraid of any ambushes. He followed behind her and quickly arrived in front of a heavily guarded room. Pearl waved the token in her hand, and the guards at the door let them in. After entering, Pearl said, "Young master, our Ruan clan is a royal merchant. Although we cannot claim to be as wealthy as a nation, we have collected many treasures over the years. The Ruan clan is unable to repay young master's kindness in saving us yesterday. Madame Ruan asked Pearl to bring young master here. If you see anything you like, just take it as a token of our Ruan clan's gratitude. Song Qing-shu was startled. He did not expect this to happen. He calmly said, "To me, it was nothing. There is no need to be so courteous." Pearl quickly said, "To you, it was nothing. To us, you saved our lives. Young master, you must choose a few items. It will be good to give them to your wife." The reason why she brought Song Qing-shu here was to give the madam time to transform back into Ren Ying. If he left too soon, it would be bad if he went back and found out about the madam's identity. Song Qing-shu was moved by her words and nodded. "That's fine. Then I will choose this hairpin." There were indeed a lot of gold, silver, and jewelry in the warehouse of the Ruan family. Song Qing-shu didn't even look at them. He just chose a crystal-clear jade hairpin from a pile of jewelry. It could be seen that it was expensive, but it was not worth mentioning compared to the life-saving grace. Plus, with Song Qing-shu's current position, he did not care much for it. He only chose it because it was pleasing to the eye. "This hairpin is fine. Thank you, madam, for me." Song Qing-shu waved the hairpin in his hand at Pearl and walked out alone. He was in a hurry to give it to his wife, so he was too lazy to follow behind Pearl to take his time. Pearl originally wanted to find an excuse to delay him. Unfortunately, he was several feet away with a casual step. She could not catch up even if she wanted to. "I hope the madam is ready." Pearl stamped her feet and prayed nervously. When Song Qing-shu excitedly returned to the room, he found Ren Ying sitting in front of the dressing table. He could not help but reveal a pitiful smile. "Ying, where did you go?" Ruan Foreign looked back at her and smiled. "I just went out to get some fresh air. When I came back, I saw that you were not there. I heard them say that Ruan Foreign invited you, so I did not disturb you." Looking at the man she was chatting with just a moment ago, and now she had to pretend to be his wife. At that moment, she had a ridiculous feeling of dizziness. What is there to disturb? Song Qing-shu went over and held her cold little hands. "You have not been feeling well these days. Don't go outside to get some fresh air." Only then did Ruan Foreign remember that she had found an excuse for Tian Gue. While pulling back her hands, she changed the topic. "Why did Ruan Foreign invite you?" "Just to express her gratitude for saving my life." Song Qing-shu replied. "Did Ruan Foreign devote herself to you?" Ruan Foreign asked, as if she was possessed. Song Qing-shu was startled and could not help but laugh. "Hearing you ask like this, I almost thought that you were there just now." Ruan Foreign secretly stuck out her tongue and pretended to be calm. "She really devoted herself to me?" Song Qing-shu pinched her cheeks in annoyance. "What are you thinking about in that little head of yours, huh? Why is your skin not as tender as before?" It seems that Tian Gue's influence on a woman's body is not small. Ruan Foreign's heart skipped a beat. She thought that he had found some flaw in her face. Hearing his last sentence, she then relaxed and secretly rejoiced that her skill in disguise was excellent. Of course, the face she had disguised was not as good as the face of a real girl. Fortunately, this time she had Tian Gue as an excuse. "Devote herself to me?" Of course, Ruan Foreign could not do that. In order to express her gratitude, she let me choose anything in the treasury, but I only chose this. Song Qing-shu took out the jade hairpin in his hand and shook it. Walking over, "I will help you put in." Chapter 1681. As soon as Madame Ruan said this, she was shocked. She really couldn't figure out why she would say such a thing. Was it just because he had asked before, and she wanted to know his true thoughts? Hearing her words, Song Qing-shu was also stunned, and then showed a thoughtful expression. "Well, Madame Ruan has white skin and a beautiful appearance. She has a big chest, a thin waist, a perky butt, and a pair of long legs. The key is that sweet and coquettish baby voice. If she really devoted herself to him, there shouldn't be any man who could refuse. Look at what you can do." Madame Ruan blushed and spat fiercely. She didn't know why, but when she heard that she was so attractive in his heart, she actually felt a little happy. "Okay, I was joking with you." Song Qing-shu held her in his arms. How can she be compared to my Ying, who knew that when the other heard his words, she didn't look happy at all. Instead, her face became cold, making Song Qingshu confused. He didn't know how he had offended her. Ying looked quickly, thinking that the previous joke had gone too far. He hurriedly shifted her attention and moved her in front of the mirror. I don't want other women's things. Madame Ruan was irritated and reached out to take off the jade hairpin on her head. Hey, Song Qingshu hurriedly stopped her and smiled bitterly. This is what your husband earned with his own ability. How can it be considered other women's things? Madame Ruan also realized that her mood was a little wrong at this time, so she took advantage of the situation and snorted, "That's more like it. These 2 days, your temperament has been somewhat strange." Song Qingshu's sudden words startled Madame Ruan. Fortunately, he followed up with another sentence. It seems that this great aunt is really an annoying thing. Aunt? Madame Ruan looked at him doubtfully. It's Tiangue. Didn't I tell you before? Song Qingshu frowned. Madame Ruan's heart trembled and hurriedly smiled. I didn't react for a while. Song Qingshu nodded and agreed with her explanation. Oh yes, why didn't Madame Ruan look for you to chat these days? Maybe she was busy dealing with the aftermath of the attack on the ship yesterday. After Madame Ruan finished her explanation, she was thinking that it was not a good idea to keep doing this. It was better to find an opportunity for Madame Ruan and Ren Ying to appear at the same time so that he would not think of anything. Moreover, she could also take the opportunity to leave his side and act alone. That's true. Song Qingshu waved his hand. Forget it. It's none of their business. You should continue teaching me how to play the piano. Madame Ruan pursed her lips and smiled, sure. When he chatted with Ren Ying previously, he already knew that she was teaching Ren Ying how to play the guqin. Since he was good at playing the guqin, he was naturally not afraid. For the next 2 days, Song Qingshu held Lady Ruan every day as they drank and played the guqin at the edge of the deck. Occasionally, they would go fishing together. In the eyes of those who did not know, they would only think that the two were a pair of immortal companions, making others envious. But in the eyes of those who knew, like Pearl, the more she looked at them, the stranger her expression became. Madame is so intimate with him, and I can tell that he didn't force her. Madame can't have fallen for him. Pearl was worried for her. With great difficulty, she found a chance to ask her privately, Madam, did that person take advantage of you? Madame Ruan's face turned into a peach blossom. She unhappily rolled her eyes at her. Didn't you see that he was hugging and hugging me? Pearl lowered her voice. I mean at night, Madame Ruan spat. Is this something you should be concerned about? Pearl muttered in a low voice. I am only worried that Madame will fall for him. After all, you're already married. If the news spreads to the Yang family, shut up. Madame Ruan's face turned cold. I know what I am doing. I will find an opportunity to disguise you as me. For the next period of time, you will use my identity to deal with daily affairs, so that no one can see through you. Yes. Seeing that Madame was angry, Pearl did not dare to say anything more. Just like that, another 2 days passed. Song Qingshu learned that there was still a day's journey to Jiangling. He suddenly thought of Qi Fong. Back then, Qi Fong had escorted Di Yun's coffin back to his hometown for burial. Their hometown was near Jiangling. After Di Yun was buried, Qi Fong had originally planned to build a hut nearby to accompany him. Unfortunately, the water spinach was too small. It was inconvenient to live in the countryside. She could only bring her daughter back to Jiangling to live and visit Di Yun from time to time. The reason why Song Qingshu knew this was because he had sent people to escort her back to Jiangling. When they returned, his subordinates reported it. Not long ago, the Jin army broke through Jiangling. I don't know if she was affected. Looking at the green mountains and clear waters in the distance, Song Qingshu could not help but worry. Even though he had ordered all the Jin soldiers not to burn, kill, and loot, and not to bully the local people, but the order was one thing and the execution was another. Thinking of how she was a single mother with a crying daughter, he did not know how many difficulties she would encounter in the chaos of war. Previously, the distance was too far. Although he thought of it, he could not split himself. Now that he was about to pass by, if he still did not care, He was afraid that his conscience would not be at ease in the future. Once the idea of going to see if she was safe came up, he could not hold back anymore. In the end, he ran back to ruin Ying and told her about it. Madame Ruan was stunned. You will only reach Jiangling tomorrow night. Song Qingshu nodded. That's why I plan to make a trip there first. With my lightness skill, I should be able to reach there in a few hours. After I'm done with my business in River Tomb, I'll wait there. You guys should be almost there. Madame Ruan was still a little confused, but we are on the river. Do you want to go to the shore first? Song Qingshu held her hand and smiled. Ying, have you forgotten my Qinggong? Dharma can cross the river on a reed. Why should I be afraid? All right then. Madame Ruan did not dare to say anything else. She was worried that the more she said, the more flaws she would expose. At the same time, she was also infected by his heroic spirit at this time. Your body is weak. It is not convenient to bring you around to feel the wind. Song Qingshu took out a copper bell and put in her hand. This is a pair of heart bells. Each bell contains the heart voodoo carefully cultivated by the 5 poisons order. As long as you shake one of the bells, the voodoo in the other bell will react and shake the bell. So after I leave, if anything happens here, just shake this bell and I will rush back immediately. This bell was given to him by Indigo Phoenix not long ago. Although it could not reach 1,000 miles away, it could still reach a distance of 100 miles. Sometimes it could not help but sigh. Although the technology of this world was far behind the previous world, there were some magical aspects that the science of the later world could not explain. For example, internal force and this heart voodoo. Such a precious thing. Madame Ruan was shocked. She thought that if Ren Ying had this before, how could her plan succeed? In my heart, Ying, you are countless times more precious than it. I almost forgot about this before, but it is not too late to give it to you now. Song Qingshu smiled at her. He did not expect that the other person was not his wife at all. Thank you. Madame Ruan took it and lowered her head to hide the somewhat red rim of her eyes. During this period of time, she had never seen such a gentle and considerate man. Sometimes she was even a little jealous of Ren Ying. Not only was she beautiful and noble, she actually had such a perfect lover. Her life was simply a dream. There is no need to be so polite with me. Song Qingshu kissed her forehead. Unknowingly, the two of them had already arrived at an empty deck. I will leave first. You have a good rest. After saying that, his whole body jumped into the river. Madame Ruan was startled and hastily went to the side of the boat to look down. She saw that the other person was just standing on the surface of the surging river, treading on the water like that as he walked step by step into the distance. As if sensing her gaze, Song Qingshu even had the leisure to turn his head and wave at her. You're tuning into the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.